Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the stream. I'll wait here just a second for anyone that's waiting to pop in. Welcome back to the stream. Tonight, as you probably were able to see from the title, I'm going to be testing some pre-ray tracing GPUs. So we'll focus on the 1660 Super, the GTX 1080, and the RX 5600 XT. All these tests will be in Blender 3.6. Um, for the 5600 XT, I'm not going to run HIPRT. It's not going to use it, and I don't think it'll do anything except for cause some slowdowns. Um, it'll either do nothing or it'll cause a slowdown or an issue. So we will just run normal HIP, but it is all Blender 3.6. I know that a lot of people still have, especially the 1660 Super. And I've had people asking about the 1080 Ti recently, which I don't have a Ti, I just have a normal 1080. But, um, being a high end card from back in the day, that's probably a good one to test too. So, the other thing to note is I have data on my spreadsheets now, which you're seeing on the screen. Uh, I have some extra data from a subscriber named Edgar the Face. Edgar the Face has submitted, quite a bit more data even than I've shown here. I have to plug in the rest of it, but we have some 7900 XTX data and some Apple M1 8-core data that I have added to the spreadsheet. And as you can see here, I have a little call out for Edgar, but that's awesome. If anybody has information they want to share, I'm going to have more formal ways of doing that in the future. But for now, just some comments with your test results are helpful. Yeah, otherwise, I think we'll just kind of get going here. So, if you pop in, get in the chat, let me know you came by. Obviously, if you have any questions or comments or whatever, let me hear them. But yeah, we'll just get started. So we're gonna sign in to our first machine here with the classroom scene. And let's pull that up. So I have render 10, which has both of the NVIDIA GPUs for tonight. So I'll go to the performance tab in Task Manager to show you real quick. We have a 1660 Super, and we have a GTX 1080. I just updated drivers like right now, so the drivers are current, although for these cards it probably won't make any difference. I am running NVIDIA's Studio driver, the brand new one. So just so you're aware, 8 gigs of VRAM on the 1080, 6 available on the 1660 Super. We'll see if these cause problems or not. If they do, we'll have to disable the 1660 Super since it does limit the GTX 1080. I don't think they'll matter for these test scenes, but we will see. All right, yeah. So let's open Blender 3.6 here. So now both of these GPUs are installed directly into the motherboard. They do get full 16 lane slots. They're probably running at 8 speed, but they're generation 3 lanes, so they should have 8 Gen 3 lanes. So that should be plenty, especially for any of these scenes that take more than a few seconds to render. The loading time is not going to be the bottleneck. But let's get this opened up here. So this is Blender 3.6. The classroom scene, like I always do, all I'm going to change is switch the device for cycles rendering to the GPU compute. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select just one of the two GPUs. So let's just start with the 1660 Super. And I guess one other general note, I'm going to run CUDA for these. Optics and CUDA don't really make a lot of difference for non-ray tracing core GPUs. I think for denoising and stuff like that, they could. And if it looks like it makes a difference, we'll try both. But for now, I'm going to use CUDA. I did have some additional load times and stuff on optics that I think just made the results worse, not better. So optics really uses ray tracing cores more, and these two cards do not have that. So we're going to start with the 1660 Super on CUDA, and I think I have everything set up, so I'm just going to render the image. And I did test this the other day just to see what would happen, and the results have been a little bit surprising. So we'll see. We'll see if they're the same tonight. Hopefully they are, but from my first tests, it kind of looks like the 1660 Super may actually beat the 1080 in most of these scenes. And that kind of doesn't make any sense. If you look up the specs, the 1080, it is a generation older, but it has a lot more CUDA cores, and they're at the same clock speed as the 1660 Super. So we'll have to look into that. The 1660 Super that I have is a dual fan kind of standard configuration, and the 1080 is the Founders Edition type blower card. So if there's any thermal throttling, it's very possible that the 1080 is being bottlenecked. And obviously not all models would have suffered that same fate, so we'll have to check that out. But here's the 1660. It is almost done with the classroom. And this is looking just like it was the other day, so I think we're going to be right at about 1.5 minutes. All right, so we'll call that 1 minute and 27 seconds. So let's throw that on the results here. 1 minute and 27, so 87 seconds. So just looking at the board, this is a little bit slower than a RX 6600 and just a bit faster than a 5700 XT, so that's interesting. We'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so let's just go ahead and switch our device over here to the 1080. We're still on CUDA, so I'll just exit that and we'll just render the image. So like I said, my test the other day, we're actually showing that the 1080 was slower than the 1660 Super, and that makes almost no sense at all. If you look up pure CUDA type benchmarks, the 1080 should be ahead. So while this renders, actually, let's pull up the task manager and just see if we get any really high heat. I think I also checked this the other day though, and it looks like it's running 100% or nearly 100%, and it never gets too hot. So something else might be going on, but we'll see what we get. But yeah, if this holds, it should be a little bit slower or about the same as the 1660 Super. The only thing I could see being the difference is that maybe in Blender the Turing generation cores in the 1660 Super may be just a lot better at this type of rendering than the cores from the 1080, but normally such a reduction in the number of cores would cause enough of a slowdown from the bigger card to the smaller one that it won't catch up. So the 1080 has I want to say 2560 cores. If I'm not saying that wrong, I'll have to look for sure. But the 1660 Super has basically 1,000 cores less. So you wouldn't think that it would catch the 1080. And obviously, it's hard to compare them between generations too, but that's a whole other story. Yeah, so we never got really high temps. And this is just core temp. This isn't actually measuring the memory or anything, but looks like we got up to about 60, which isn't awful. I wouldn't say that it's for sure bottlenecking or anything, but we're right at 1 minute and 49 seconds. So basically 109 seconds for the 1080. So that's 22 seconds slower than the 1660 Super. That definitely doesn't look like what I would expect. So we'll come back to that, and maybe we can test the classroom scene one more time later with optics. But as far as I can tell, that's legit for now. So let's open our other machine here. Now this one has the 5600 XT. And again, the reason I want to test these, I'm not going to call them low-end cards, they're just older. I could sit here and test 4090s and brand new stuff all the time, but most people don't have those. Most people want to know where they can get a good value. So to me, testing all of the cards I have, including the older and lower end ones, is super valuable to people. So let me know if that is not the case and these are just a waste of time. I don't think they are. A lot of people can't get the highest end new stuff, so and you know, we're all value hunters in the PC building world. So at the end of the day, we're kind of all in the same boat. I just have the luxury of already owning a bunch of these, so I can share my test results with everyone. But all right, here I'm showing we're running Blender 3.6, okay, with the 5600 XT in HIP, not HIP RT, because it shouldn't make any difference on this card. So let's go ahead and hit render. Now, some of these benchmarks are going to take a little bit longer today because we're dealing with weaker cards than basically than any of the RT cards that I have. So what I'll probably do is hop around between this machine and the other machine, just so you guys aren't sitting here watching, you know, pixels buffer basically. So let's go get our other render machine set up really fast, and then we'll come back and read this result. So let's close out of this render, and we're just going to open the Barbershop file. That always takes just a little bit to load anyway. It's a very, very, very heavy scene as far as how much texture and objects it has to load. Okay, so there is that. And I'll just start to get some settings going here. So GPU compute, frame 100, which is what I always run on this scene. Definitely want to stay consistent. We'll go to edit, preferences, and we'll swap back onto the 1660 Super. And I am going to go ahead and render this image. We'll make sure it starts up here, and then we will hop back over to see what the 5600 is doing. And I don't know if you guys saw the chat. I pinned a message in there, but one of the subscribers to this channel, Edgar the Face, has submitted a bunch of data. So if people were interested in 7900 XTX and some Apple benchmarks, I have been updating my spreadsheet to show those numbers, but thanks to Edgar the Face for sharing those data, because I don't own those machines. So I believe we have an 8-core GPU Apple M1 and the 7900 XTX are both included in that list. So they're on my spreadsheets. I will show them as we go here. And let's go. Actually, let's get the 6600 result. So we have 1 minute and 57 seconds. So let's call that 117 approximately. And so that completes the classroom part of this, but you can see here some of the results. So the Apple M1 8-core GPU took almost 250 seconds on the Metal API to run the classroom scene, and the 7900 XTX took just under 17 seconds on HIP RT. Now I believe these were on Blender 3.6. They may have been 3.5. So those numbers could be updated. But if you compare, at least on this scene, The 7900 XTX and the 4070 are neck and neck. We'll see in bigger scenes what the difference is there, but um, yeah, for the first point of data, I guess that's what we have to compare. And then if you look here, the M1 with the 8-core GPU is just nowhere near any of these other discrete GPUs. So I find that really interesting, and I really want to know what newer Apple hardware can do as well. But yeah, so the next thing we'll have here is moving on to the barbershop scene. Let's check on our NVIDIA. Looks like that one's going to be a little bit. Make sure here for just a second that it isn't crashed out. Looks like it's kind of stuck on frame 302. Doesn't look frozen. Nope. Okay. It's just it looks like it's running about 61 samples at a time. So it's taking its sweet time to get from there to there, but let's go back to the other machine and check on it. Okay, this is render 4. This one has the 5600 XT, so let's switch files here. And we'll head over to the barbershop scene with this guy. Now, the barbershop scene takes a while, so this is probably the best one to jump back and forth with GPUs, but we will load it up here. All right. First things first, switch to GPU compute. Then we'll go into our Blender rendering preferences. And we're going to run normal HIP again with the 5600 XT. And once this menu loads up, we need to switch to frame 100. Glad I remembered. And then we can render the image. Now it looks like the 1660 Super did fine on this scene, so this one also has 6 gigs of VRAM. It should do fine, RAM size wise, or VRAM size wise. So I will make sure this starts up, and then we should be good to go read the other one. I put my rig to render 6. Okay. So 6 1660 Ti's. Plus the speed is the same if I only put one. I put my rig to render 6 of them. Yes. Okay. So I think what you're talking about is, and I can actually demonstrate this on here. I will have to remote into a different machine, but I think this is a Blender 3.0 plus problem. Edgardo is talking about having a multi GPU rig and running in this case, all 6 of their 1660 Ti's will run at the same render speed as just one GPU. So basically, imagine you have a rig with multiple GPUs. You cannot effectively run them all and get good scaling. I have noticed that, and I've argued with people a little bit about it in comments, but it is definitely a thing in Blender 3 Plus. So what I've done to test it is I have multiple, I think they're mostly 3080 Ti's and then one 3080 on one of my rigs. And I've been able to test each card individually, and they run how they should. And then when I try to run all of them, the total speed of all of them together is slower than one individual card. It doesn't make any sense. but I think it's a bug. I think it is a either optics or just a cycles bug currently. All right, 6 minutes exactly for the 1660 Super. I'm gonna plug that into our spreadsheet real quick since we have it. So 6 minutes is 360 seconds, making that right at where the 6600 and the 5700 XT are. So 1660 Super and the 6600 look to be a very close tie. The 6600 is a little bit faster, but very interesting. But yes, Edgardo, to answer your question, the best way to get the speed out of all your cards currently in Blender is to run a separate iteration of Blender on each GPU. That's the only way I've been able to get it to work. So open one iteration, render with the first GPU, open another one, or a second Blender scene, if you will. Select only the second one, and so on and so forth. And if you do that, and if you have enough CPU cores to direct all the traffic, then you should be able to get the full speed out of them. They just have to do separate frames. Yeah, it's very, very weird. So I am going to switch this over to the 1080 for the barbershop scene, and we'll just keep rendering right along. This will speed up nicely once we get past the barbershop scene, which is the heavy one. And let's go back to our other machine here. And it looks like I missed. There it is. Okay, so this one's past halfway done. I'm not surprised at all that the 5600 XT is a bit slower than these two on this kind of really heavy scene, but we'll see. It still has a chance to catch up. But yeah, so just to repeat one more time, if you notice that multiple GPUs don't scale very well anymore, it seems to be a bug in Blender 3. I would run one new scene of Blender for each GPU in your machine, and then have them each render a frame separately, and you'll get the full performance out of the total set of GPUs. It's very irritating, but it's definitely a reality. And I don't know. Let's see. I may be able to open it. Let's see. I think that's render 11. Let me look though. Render 11. So my render 11 machine is the best example I have. And this doesn't matter if they're on risers or if they're plugged right into the motherboard. I've had the same problem, but this one has 3 GPUs. So we will go run, let's go run like Classroom or something. Actually, these are fast. We'll go run Barbershop with this machine and see. But here, let me show you. Task Manager, Performance. Okay, so we have a 3080, a 3080 Ti, and a 3080 Ti. Okay, these ones are not installed in the board. They are installed on mining risers, which are one lane. I've never had those tests slow enough to affect a render, especially on a longer, more heavy scene. So I'm not worried about the risers too much. I think I measured the difference to be maybe up to 3%. So it's not really a big deal. But let's go load up the barbershop scene, and I'll show you this just for reference. New studio driver is available. I haven't run this rig for a little while. So we're on older drivers, but that should not affect the little side test we're doing here. Okay. I'm going to plug in frame 100. And then GPU compute. No other changes. We'll open preferences. Okay, so we're going to run optics because normally it's better. but I'm going to turn all three of these cards on. So we've got two 3080 Ti's and one 3080. And then I'm just going to hit render. Okay, now normally these three super powerful machines would just bust through this scene. But you'll see that it's not going to go faster than just one of them alone. Now, to be fair, I haven't tested this again in Blender 3.6, but I don't think the answer is going to be any different. I think it's kind of an underlying bug in Blender 3, or really Cycles X to be precise. Okay, so let's pull up Task Manager again. Now you can see all of the GPUs are running close to 100% utilization, at least according to Task Manager. So it's not like they're not being used. But the scene's already done, 52.5 seconds. Okay, so that'll stay on the render frame here. Now let's just go turn on one of the 3080 Ti's, and then I'll hit render one more time. And if our theory holds, then this will take the exact same amount of time. So this is one 3080 Ti versus two 3080 Ti's and a 3080 together. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I would say it already looks a bit faster. So maybe there's a lot more testing to be done here. We're already halfway done with our time, but we're only quarter with the samples. Now, the other thing that I guess it's not necessarily that multiple GPUs will scale exactly down to what one GPU will scale to, but there's definitely a lot of loss trying to run them all. So let's just see what we get here. Okay, so just remember 52.5 seconds was all three cards together. And we're just going to wait. It's just going to be a few more seconds. We might have to get the calculator up just to be a little more precise here, but hopefully it stops right at about 1 minute and 40 seconds, because that'd be a easy one to compare. Okay, perfect. So one 3080 Ti took 1:40, where two 3080 Ti's and a 3080 altogether took 52 seconds. So the one card was nowhere near 2.5 or 3 times slower, basically. So if I run this frame 3 times, this machine will get 3 frames at about 1:40. So if you want to get the most out of your GPUs in a multi-GPU rig in Blender 3.6, or in, I think, any Blender 3 iteration, you have to run a separate scene on a separate, you have to open Blender separately for each GPU and run them individually. So for animations, that obviously is not a problem, because you're just going to be running multiple scenes. So it's not a huge deal, but that's a great question, Edgardo. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a topic that honestly I should probably study a lot more. So we can do that in another video. That's probably a good one to discuss, but for now, let's keep going on these benchmarks, and then we can circle back to it if people are interested. Okay, so this was the Render 4 machine, which is the 5600 XT. 7 minutes and 22 seconds exactly on Barbershop, so let's log that. So 7:22. I don't want to record these wrong, so I'm just going to cheat and use my calculator. 442, is that correct? I just don't want to log anything wrong. Yes, 442 seconds. Okay, so the 5600 XT is about 80 seconds slower than the 1660 Super. Let's go swap over here and let this one load up. This one should be done or close to done. I think it's probably just loading. Actually, it looks like it's not quite done yet, so we'll wait this one out, but um, this is the GTX 1080 loading on the barbershop scene. Okay, so this one's already somewhere around 6 minutes. The 1660 Super did it exactly in 6 minutes. So again, I'm a little suspicious of the 1080, but we'll log it for now and see what happens. So this one should be done soon. But yeah, what else? What else is going on with everyone? Let me know in the chat. I wish I could hear everybody, but I can't. You guys can just hear me, obviously. So you got to use that chat and let me know what you're thinking. Um, if you guys have been seeing my community posts lately, I'll probably be working on that character more in the next day or two, and probably even tonight. But one thing I really want to talk about is the Patreon page. I'm not asking you to go and pay anything there. They've changed Patreon a lot so that I can post stuff for free, and it's just a good way to share files now without having to go through like Google Docs or something. So go check that out. You can become a member on my Patreon for free if you want. I think it's fun. Obviously, if you don't like it, then avoid it. But um, I'm going to share files. I'm going to share benchmark scenes that I create. And then I think the first thing I'm going to share next is some like pre-built meta rigs that I've created for different types of characters. So look for that soon because they'll just be on there for free. So basically, I'll have different configurations of, like my characters, centaurs with different animal heads and all kinds of different combos. And then if you wanted to use them, you can just pop them in a Blender scene and parent your mesh to them, and you'd be good to go. So, um, that's a good example of what I'll be doing with it. But anyway, so this is the GTX 1080 and Barbershop. It looks like it got done 10 minutes and 13 seconds. So, 10 minutes, 613 seconds. So that is actually significantly slower than the 1660 Super. And I find that particularly suspicious. um, let's make sure that's the way we had it. I don't know. I guess if somebody else has more experience with the 1080, I don't think they're supposed to be slower than a 1660 Super, but maybe. I guess it all just comes down to the kind of the IPC of the cores, but anyway, let's go on to the next test scene here. So we're gonna try the Lone Monk. This one I have crashes with fairly frequently, so let's see if these ones will survive. Um, GPU compute. Let's go ahead and switch over to the 1660 Super, and we'll render the scene. And CUDA tends to be easier to run than optics, so I have noticed that if optics is having problems, I'll just switch to CUDA, and it kind of solves the problem. But this one's going to take a bit too, so we'll go start up the 5600. Okay, we already logged this result, so we just need to switch file. Don't save. All right, we'll get this Lone Monk scene opened up. Take just a second here. Alrighty. Make sure we are on GPU compute for cycles, preferences, 5600 XT with HIP. And we will start this scene. I'll probably hop back and forth between this and the other machine just because for whatever reason this one causes crashes fairly often. But it looks like we are working away just fine over here. And just in case anyone's curious, let's get Task Manager open here. So this one is a 4-core, 8-thread, 4th generation i7, but it's a relatively high clocking i7 from back in the day. So I'm not worried that we're getting any CPU bottleneck. And as you can see, while rendering, the CPU doesn't really care. It's not even 20% utilized. So I probably won't run 2 separate GPUs at a time on this for actual science purposes. We may do it just for fun. Because I can demonstrate that old CUDA GPUs can still be super, super useful together. But yeah, just to show everyone, I'm running this render fine with one GPU and my CPU full bore at 4.4 gigahertz, basically. So that question comes up a lot, and it's a fair one because sometimes the processor can bottleneck things, but in this case, I don't believe it is. And I've had a lot of people ask about this actually because they see it on these videos and streams, but um, it seems to be a fairly unique processor, or maybe it was kind of a higher end one. I wasn't into computers back when the i7 4790K was out, um, but it's very, very interesting. The Realm Jumper says the renders are coming out quite clean. Yes, they are. I haven't had any errors, and they're looking pretty decent. So, um, hopefully everything keeps testing well. But thanks for stopping by. It's a lot of fun to have everyone here. But yeah, I think it kind of goes to show that if you have relatively older hardware, the 10 series cards, the 1660 Super, stuff like that. Um, People worry that they're not adequate for Blender, but they definitely are. You know, yeah, they're slower, but you can do a lot of work. And I've known, especially some other YouTubers that um, really, really learn how to optimize scenes for them. But for some reason, my 1660 Super is beating my 1080 by quite a bit, and that makes me suspicious. But I wanted to test some smaller and older cards because there's no reason that you have to go get a whole bunch of debt and throw a RTX 4090 on your credit card. Um, it's better to learn how to optimize your scene and learn to deal with what you have. So I'm sure some people will see this and laugh at me because I have a 4090 and all of these cards, but um, basically just because of some timing, I got lucky to have all of those, and now I can share that info. So yeah, so these scenes are going to take a long time. This one's only about a third done. Um, the Realm Jumper says, "You're welcome. I'm learning information. I am glad to hear you're learning. The worst possible thing would be if these did not serve any purpose. So I'm happy. I'm happy you're learning. But yeah, so what's crazy about these scenes is, I mean, even a 1660 Super, it's not like it's a weak card, but think about this compared to like just gaming in general. These frames are taking 5, 10, 15 minutes, for one frame. So it's really wild how intense this final rendering stuff is. And I'm trying to do a lot more Eevee stuff where I can, because sometimes it's good enough, or if you want the style of it, it's even better. So I'm kind of trying to come back and learn some optimization myself. On my MacBook, I delete items that aren't in view in order to optimize my scene, since I don't have a great graphics card. Hey, yeah, that kind of stuff is definitely good. You can duplicate your scene, and for that render or that frame, if you know the rest of the scenery is not going to be in it, just take it out, make a copy of your file, and you can go from there. But um, yeah, I know one setting that you can change. Let's try to go find. I think both of these machines are probably locked up. One thing you can try is, oh, I don't want to mess with those because that's going to cause a problem. Let's open back up the render 11. That's a good idea. Yeah, I think having uh, multiple saves of the same scene is probably necessary, because you're going to have different camera views and stuff, and you ought as well just build the exact like the exact frame you need, basically, and everything else can be removed or hidden. Um, but let's just open my diamond scene here just for reference. So the realm jumper, if you want to, you can also turn on. There is this render region checkbox, and this is under the output tab, and then right under where you select your resolution and compression, um, you can check this render region box on, and I believe it will actually save quite a bit of time on not rendering things that are not in the scene. So you can look at that. Still trying to render in cycles. It takes longer, but still manages. I just can't run simulations and stuff. Are simulations viable with the 1660 Super? Well, the thing about simulations is actually calculating them, doing the baking is all on the CPU, not on the GPU. So I'll have to turn that on too. Yeah, yeah. Try that render region checkbox and see if it makes any difference. Um, but yeah, as far as simulations, the baking, the calculating of the simulation is done on the CPU, and the rendering is done on the GPU. So as much as I wish my 4090 could do my fluid simulations, it still can't. I think there's some very, very high end fluid simulators that are more for science, that they use server GPUs. So imagine just banks and banks of A100 server GPUs running these hyperscale fluid simulations. I don't have access to any of that kind of thing. So the ones that I have, like Flip Fluids add-on, is very good at multi-threading on the CPU, but it cannot use the GPU for baking yet. So um, to me, it seems like they should be able to, but I don't know enough about the actual hardware to decide whether or not that makes any sense to me. So, um, but yeah, if you're trying to do a bunch of simulations, which is fluid sims, cloth, rigid bodies, any of that, it's all going to be calculated by the processor, not the GPU. At least in Blender. And as time goes on, other add-ons may come and go that allow us to use the GPU for that, but most of them cannot. And I think the reason is GPUs aren't good at using data that is persistent from frame 1 to frame 3, because it doesn't know how to relate um, those little finite data points, whereas the CPU can store frame 1 while it calculates frame 2 and then compare it to frame 3. So I think for whatever reason, the hardware of GPUs is much harder to program for linear data like that. So if you wanted a super nerdy in-depth explanation, that would be it. Okay. So now we are just about to get done with the Lone Monk scene on the 1660 Super, and it's already been 11 minutes, so it looks like it's going to be 12 and a half or 13 minutes. So let's go check on the 5600 XT, which is probably a bit behind. Yep. So that one's still about 3/4. And these ones are going to take a while. And then, according to my previous data, the 1080 is going to take even longer than this. So let's just see. But yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to run this intense of a scene on this kind of GPU, and there would be plenty of ways to reduce the render time here if you wanted to, but for these lower end ones, it's just going to be slower. So let's go look. Let's go look at some other data that we have. So uh, on the barbershop scene here, again, Edgar the Face had submitted some benchmarks for me. Uh, the 7900 XTX ran just under 70 seconds. So that is about 10 seconds faster than the 4070. What else can we compare it to? The 4090 is still about twice as fast as the 7900 XTX in the barbershop scene. And then the Apple M1 with the 8-core GPU on the Metal API ran in 1315 seconds compared to every other GPU on here. That's pretty slow. So that's about twice as slow as the GTX 1080 did in this scene. So comparing these two here. But I'm not as familiar with Apple, so I think the M1 8 core is a bit slower or older, so I'd have to learn a bit more. Um, the Realm Jumper says, "Well, I very much appreciate that. My 2.5 gigahertz quad core Intel Core i7 would die from simulations. Um, what PC parts do you recommend for smooth animation with little hiccups?" Uh, you know, somebody was just asking me in comments what PC to build, and it really depends on what exactly you're doing. Because imagine you're not trying to do cloth all the time, or you're not doing water all the time. You may have to bake every now and then. I would say 6-core processor is okay, and then you'd want to save your money and spend it on the GPU for rendering. But if you were going to do heavy simulations, like um, you guys will see with the Bull Centaur character I've been working on, I'm going to have him smashing through some like Roman columns, and it's going to have cloth simulations and particle effects, and then some destruction effects. So when I do that kind of thing, I would say a minimum of 8-core CPU, but really you should probably be looking at like a 5900X or higher, so 12 or 16 core processor. So it's hard to tell people exactly what to get. I run fluid sims constantly and other simulations just because I try to strive for sort of the more realistic simulated looking stuff. Um, which to be fair, my desktop, my workstation is a no compromise machine. Um, so I have the 16 core 5950X and the 4090 with plenty of RAM, but um, a good balance for most people is probably get an 8-core CPU that's modern. So you can get, like, if you look at 5000 series AMD CPUs right now, so like 5700X, 5800X, some of those are super cheap, like $200. Relatively cheap, I should say. Those will do very good for most of the time. And if you don't know you need 16 cores, that's going to save you a lot of money. But even like the 5900X, which is 12 cores, I've seen that going for like $310 lately, which is fantastic. So Yeah, if you're going to do heavy simulations, you want high clock speed, and um, the more cores come into play when you have a more complex simulation. So if I if I take the standard cube in Blender and turn it into a fluid, and it's only got like the one voxel, the one cube shape of fluid, it's not going to take very much as far as cores. It's going to take high clock speed. Um, if you get in and if I ever show some of I have some 150 gigabyte baking files for fluid sims. If it's something like that, then you're going to want a lot of extra cores too, and you're going to want them to be high clock speeds. So I guess I'm blabbing on, but in general, I would say if you're going to be simulating a lot, especially with fluids, hair, or cloth, I would probably get at least 8 cores, as high clock speed as you can. Maybe look at 12 cores or more. Um, and then GPU is all for rendering. So you can bake textures with GPUs, but all modern GPUs are going to do that really fast. I wouldn't worry about that. I would mostly worry about the rendering speed for those. So, but yeah, if people send like, here's my budget, here's the kind of scene I want to do, I can really tune my answer because I spend a lot of time researching hardware. But it just, there's a difference between some little water simulation with some cloth and like I want to do simulations constantly. But all right. So we have the 1660 Super finished in the Lone Monk scene. 12 minutes and 39 seconds is what it took. So let's go log that real quick. 12 minutes and 39 seconds. And I should be able to do this math in my head, but I don't want to just do it wrong. 759. 759 seconds it took. All right. Probably could have started the 1080 while I was blabbing on about computer stuff, but yeah, the Realm Jumper, just ask away if you got other questions, or obviously anybody else. I spend hours and hours every week just watching um, prices and checking on benchmarks and just reading up on all of it. So definitely ask away. And I don't know if they'll come by, but I was literally working with somebody, and I actually made a community post right before I got on the stream um, about a $2,300 budget machine, and I can only do so good without any details, but um, basically you're picking between a big GPU and a big CPU, and it just depends on what you're doing. So, and if you can run a multiple PC setup, what I would actually recommend is doing like I do and have a strong desktop and then having some workers that render, because then your worker just really has to be a preview machine, or I'm sorry, your workstation, your desktop only has to be a preview machine, so your GPU could theoretically be a little bit weaker, and then spend your money on the CPU. And then when your scene is done, your previews look okay, then you send them off to your render farm. And even if that's only one machine, it's going to save you a bunch of time because it can render while you're working on your next frames. And then when it's time to go to bed, you can run your workstation, and now you have two PCs rendering. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but people get too hung up on rendering. And theoretically, you could have old CPUs do it too. It just anything helps, but everybody's situation is different, and people have a lot of use cases. All right. Okay. Yes, and you are welcome. That is why I do these streams. The streams, the GPU testing itself is mainly just me watching the thing work. So it is a lot more fun for me to be live and be able to answer some questions. So it is no problem at all. But it looks like our 5600 XT got done, 14 minutes, and we'll round it down to 8 seconds. So 14 plus, oops, I'm doing my math wrong. 14 times 60 plus 8, 848 seconds. So kind of what we've seen already. Whoops, that was the wrong one. Clear that out. What we've seen already, the 5600 XT is just a little slower than the 1660 Super. Truth be told, I actually am surprised. These are quite a bit closer to each other. And I think that used prices for the 5600 are actually a lot better than the 1660 Super. So if you're looking for 6 gigabyte GPUs, maybe look into that 5600 XT a little bit more than you would have. I would still probably just go get a 6600. That should be on here somewhere. Let's see. Have I not run it on here? I might not have. But the 6600s make more speed because the ray tracing cores on those. So if you're looking for budget stuff, you can get a 6600 at $200. Otherwise, the Intel A750s are really good, around $200. It's just you have to have certain motherboard features to be able to run them at full speed. But yeah. So anyway, Lone Monk scene. We can talk about our other information. Some really interesting stuff on this one. So the 7900 XTX running HIP RT took about 120 seconds, whereas the RTX 4090, which normally is quite a bit faster, was right under 100 seconds. So the 7900 XTX is only about 20% slower in this frame, and I find that really, really interesting because the price difference, especially on a good sale, is significantly more than that. So let's just plug that in. So these you should be able to get for $1,000. They've been for less than that recently. Well, this test shows that there is nowhere near a 60% speed gap here. So that is definitely notable. Normally the 4090 blows the 7900 out of the water, but in this case it looks a lot closer. Okay. Unknown says, compared to 5800X and i5 13600K, is it a good upgrade? I know I'll need a new motherboard, changing AMD to Intel, but is it worth the hassle for 20 to 30% performance increase? 5800X to 13600K. That's hard for me to know. If your performance increase is 20 to 30% multi-threaded, you're only going to see that in the case where you're fully utilizing the cores. So if you're baking a fluid simulation, for instance, if you aren't using enough voxels in your fluid sim, you're going to be held up by just the clock speed. So unless you know you'll use that many cores, it may or may not be worth it. I would say if the 13600K is a lot better IPC clock speed, that kind of stuff, you probably won't notice it, but it will improve all of your workflows. I find it hard to make a CPU the real bottleneck, but I have 16 cores, so I'm used to not worrying about it. But I can get in and we can run a fluid sim here in just a second to show you what I mean. But yeah, we'll keep discussing that in here. We'll go back and forth on that because the i5 13th gen that you've mentioned would also benefit from faster RAM, and I think that matters a lot in simulating. And to be clear, I wouldn't buy a CPU based on rendering speed, because even a low-end old Kepler GPU, like 600 series NVIDIA GPU, like old, will probably beat most modern CPUs in rendering. So we're not even going to use them for rendering unless we know that we need to for the RAM, or if your scene is just so massive it has to be on CPUs. But yeah, if you're talking about baking and stuff, it's a toss up. So, but there's other benefits with the newer platform. So it's hard to have just a yes or no answer on a lot of these questions. But they're good discussions. And then the realm jumper says this has made me consider getting an older CPU. I was looking more towards a pre-built 4070 machine. Oh, older GPU. Yeah. So if you look at these results, so if you, what's a good example? Um, like a 3070. Okay, so a 3070 has 8 gigs of VRAM, but um, it is 35%. Well, it depends on which way you go. I always do this backwards. It's 100 seconds slower. So in the Lone Monk scene, the 4070 did 194 seconds. The 3070 did 304. So I'll say the 3070 is 50% slower than the 4070. So, but you also get 12 gigs of VRAM. So I would caution against getting older GPUs unless you can get a higher end older one. But just keep in mind the trade off is you're going to use a lot more electricity. So um, if your power rate is cheap, you're going to come out ahead because you'll save the money up front and you'll get more VRAM. If your power rate is high, saving money up front will basically burn itself off really fast. So it's hard to say, but um, if you were looking at a 4070, let's go back to some of these other results. Let's go to my diamonds set. Um, let's go to the 3.5. So if you're looking at a 4070 versus older cards, 3080 Ti, 3090, and 3080 are still faster than the 4070. Okay, so just a little bit in some cases, a few seconds, and in this case these are minutes. This is my big heavy animation scene. It's 100 frames. It's a full animation. Um, so you're gonna save some cash up front, but like for instance the 3080 Ti is a 320 watt GPU, and the 4070 is only a 200 watt. So it really depends. People get really hung up on raw speed and price, but you also have to consider the electricity. So just keep it in the back of your head. I have pretty cheap power where I live. It just happens to be relatively cheap. That's why I've been able to mine here and there for all these years because it's never cost so much that it forced me to stop. Um, some people, it's literally some places in the world, I'm not even kidding, are 8 to 15 times more expensive electricity rate than mine. So, going from a 320 watt 3080 Ti to a 200 watt 4070 is a huge difference over the long run. So, you just have to keep that in mind. Would you say it's more about how all the parts work together? I think I think in general, yes. Um, if you know that you're going to need CPU work done more, then definitely build for that. More so like it's not quite like gaming, where in gaming there's no reason to have one part of your machine outweigh the rest because you're going to have a bottleneck. It's just a matter of knowing your workload. So, um, a good reference would be like if you know you're going to do a lot of EV renders that are very very fast on the GPU, maybe get a cheaper GPU, and then you can run more simulations on a more expensive CPU. So I think that the GPU and the CPU do not actually help each other in Blender very much, if that makes sense. So as long as you have 4 cores or more, you're probably going to be fine with any GPU out there as far as rendering goes. But you know, having an expensive GPU is not going to help you bake on the CPU at all. So, imagine putting your budget all to the CPU. You might run your baking really fast, but then your rendering takes a long time because your GPU is slow. So it's another one of those, like, what exactly are you doing, I guess. If you wanted just a balanced machine, though, that does everything fine, and you might have some slowdowns here and there where you were like, oh, this part would have been better for this case or whatever. But if you want a good balance, I would get something like a 4070 for your GPU and an 8-core CPU that's modern. So 5700X. What is the i5 13600K? I think that's more than 8 cores now. But stuff like that would be a good balance. I know that I simulate a lot, so to me, 16 cores or more is ideal. Um, Truth be told, the next CPU I buy will probably be a Threadripper 7000, hopefully with 32 cores, but we'll see what they offer. I'm also not going to buy that instead of pay off my car, so that's the other problem. Um, Unknown says, speaking for GPU, does brand matter? I heard about GPU Gigabyte got a crack on the PCB after only a year of use, so I'm a bit cautious from what brand GPU I'm picking. That's a tough one. I don't want to tell people wrong. Um, what I would do is make sure you're comfortable buying a GPU that is either under a good warranty, and I think Gigabyte's warranties are decent. Um, Otherwise, make sure you're buying a brand that the hardware doesn't have any complaints, and that's harder to do than making sure you have a warranty. But if you get on eBay and buy a used product, you may save some money, but it's really going to be hard to know if it's protected or not. I've never had a single problem with a Gigabyte GPU or motherboard. So my motherboards are Gigabyte. It's just because that's what I won in Newegg shuffles when the shortages were happening. So it's not like I handpicked them. But I would probably buy them again because they've been absolutely fantastic. So, um, and then I have, oh, how many? Most of my 3080 Ti's and a few of my other GPUs are Gigabyte, and I've had the issue where the thermal pads have leaked oil. I haven't even replaced them. They seem to run fine, and no PCB issues from my end. And those have been in and out of different rigs. They've been in desktops. Um, I think what you would want to do is with whatever GPU you get, especially heavy ones, just make sure they're supported well. Put all the screws into the back panel where the brackets attach, and then if you have a GPU that's heavy, um, you know, put that bracket under there or tie it up so it hangs from your case, and then there's no stress on the PCB. Um, but yeah, I don't have any brands that I would avoid. A lot of people pick on Zotac, but I've had a few of their cards and I've actually really liked those. And you know, take it with a pinch of salt, but um, my 3080 Ti, one of those is a Zotac. It's the Amp Extreme model of the 3080 Ti, and that is by far the best performing GPU compared to its peers that I've ever had. It's air cooled, and it actually, like my best reference point was mining, but it's actually like 10 to 15% faster than all of the other 3080 Ti's I have, including my EVGA for the Win 3 model, which normally would have been my pick of choice. Um, so, sometimes you get lucky, they're better, they're worse, whatever. Um, but I can't say anything bad about Zotac because all of them I've had have been fantastic. Currently, my 4090 is a Zotac, and it's the size of a shoebox, literally, but it's dead silent and completely murders all of the work I throw at it. So, yeah, brand wise, if you pick a model you like, Google it, see if there's a lot of complaints, because normally, if there are going to be any, there's going to be a lot of them. Otherwise, yeah, just try to buy it new if you can. Um, I it's tough to know, I guess, but I know it's everything's just kind of a wishy-washy answer. Uh, but that's just how this stuff seems to work, unfortunately. I'm going to log this one real fast so we can move on. 14 minutes and 57 seconds. Woo! 14 plus 57, 897 seconds. Yeah, so in this Lone Monk scene, about 140 extra seconds, more than 2 minutes slower. The 1080 was more than 2 minutes slower than the 1660 Super. See, now that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm gonna have to revisit that, but I don't know. Maybe the VRAM speed going from the 1080 with the DDR5X configuration to the DDR6 makes a difference. I don't know, but that's pretty suspicious. I mean, even the 5600 XT, yeah, even that one beat the 1080 by a minute. So we'll put a little, we'll put a little, we'll put a little check note there because that I'm not so sure about. But let's move on to Scanlands next. The Realm Jumper says, well, currently I do video editing, graphic design on my MacBook. It would be nice to also be able to game on my PC build while still being viable in Blender. What would you have in this build? Gaming can be taken out of the equation if it has to be. No, no, no. No, it definitely doesn't have to be. So video editing and graphic design are going to be pretty heavy on GPU. Well, graphic design isn't as intense as other things, but I think all those tasks are pretty GPU heavy. So in that case, I would look at, and viable in Blender, I would look at an 8-core CPU, and then probably, because to me that sounds like a balanced rig, so I'd be looking at a 4070 or maybe if you want AMD 7900 XT. If you're going to go that expensive, 4070 Ti comes into the equation. But yeah, I think that sounds like a great example of a balanced rig to me. So 8 or 12 core CPU with at least a medium range GPU, and I think you would do well with it. I would stay at least 12 gigs of VRAM or higher if you're going to be working on 4K at all, especially for video editing. And even on my 4090 when I edit videos, because if you've seen my time lapses, it's like I take maybe 60 hours of working on a character and I smash it down into 5 minutes. Obviously, there's some cutting, but even at 1440p, trying to run that playback is like very, very choppy. And I play it back with some compression and reduce file size and stuff. And, so just know if you're doing 4K stuff, there's no GPU that's going to make it completely real time. With caching and playing back a reduced resolution and stuff, you're going to be fine. But yeah, it sounds like I would say 5700X, 5800X for cheap would be okay, but then you can't upgrade anymore on that platform. Otherwise, brand new stuff, anything 8 core from either brand is going to be just fine. But yeah, like I said, I mean, you can get a 5900X for $310 right now, brand new, and that's fantastic because that's 12 cores at 4.5 gigahertz or higher, which is just nuts. And then if you're gonna go with AMD, just pay extra attention to the speed of the of the RAM. So I think you want to hit 6,000 megathreads if if you're going to use the brand new 7000 series AMD CPUs. So just take note of that. You're going to want to get good RAM with tight timings, and you're going to want to get the ones that are AMD Expo certified. They may not be certified, I guess I should call them Expo compatible or something like that. But that just means that they're designed with AMD's system specs in mind. So they should play nicer with the newer memory subsystem on the AMD's CPUs. And then I haven't had the big core, little core setup processors from Intel yet. I haven't had any since they started doing that. I should probably test them, but you know, CPU and motherboard is a lot harder for me to swap and test than a GPU because I can't use it the same way I can use GPUs. Okay. I am going to keep moving on here just a little bit. So this is the Scanland scene, which was the Blender 3.3 splash screen. I'm going to start my my renders here on this scene quick. So this is the 1660 Super in CUDA. We'll render the image. And I have also had some crashes on this one. Again, not entirely sure why, but we will figure it out. Sometimes I think your Windows updates and driver updates and everything just need to all be done. So, excuse me if I slowed down the stream some. No. These are great questions, and that is why I do these. If I didn't want to be answering these questions, I would tell you to message me and we'll talk about it later or whatever. But the point of these is definitely to help people learn what what they need, and um, just learning how to build systems and how to optimize is a big part of what I'm doing here. So yeah, definitely don't apologize. It's all good. Okay, yeah. So let's open Scanlands here on the 5600 XT as well. Yeah, there's no slowing down the stream. You know, this is here for everyone's benefit. I am in a unique position to where I have so many of these different pieces of hardware that I can help test them and hopefully help advise people so that they can make good decisions. Unknown says for RAM, do DDR4 and DDR5 make a difference? And is it worth paying more for expensive DDR5 than DDR4? Okay, so except for a couple of rare instances with Intel, you won't be able to run both. So if say you pick the 7950X CPU from AMD, that one is only compatible with DDR5. There was one generation of Intel that was compatible with DDR4 or DDR5. I think in most tests for those systems, they showed that the speed of the RAM is not going to make a big enough difference to be worth paying more for. So, if I were you, I would go look at like Gamers Nexus. I know they tested it pretty heavily. Um, who else? Who else? Tech Power Up may have tested it. Just look into some of those because those guys tested it a lot more, probably for gaming. But yeah, if you have the choice between DDR4 and DDR5, it's really probably not going to sway your speed a whole lot. But again, go look at those guys tests because they go into RAM a lot more deep than I do. Um, so the only thing I would say is for any given CPU that you look at and the motherboard you look at, make sure the RAM you're going to get is compatible. So you know, like if you went back and got a 3000 series AMD processor, you're not going to want to run more than about 3200 megathreads speed wise. So just because you can plug in 3600 doesn't mean it's going to run well. So you just got to read into it. But DDR4 versus DDR5, I don't think it makes a big enough difference. And what you'll find is that DDR5 is really hard to get to run fast anyway, especially with all 4 slots populated. So they sell kits that are 192 gigabytes. So what are they? 448s, 448 gig sticks. But it's really hard to get those to talk with the CPU effectively. So the speed gets reduced. So I don't think RAM speed is going to make or break anything. This is the 5600 XT on the Scanlands, just HIP, no RT. I'm going to run this one. And then we'll go back and check our other machine here, which should be done by now. Maybe. Oh, not quite. Not quite. We got just a minute. But yeah, let me show you my specs on my desktop here. So this here is the task manager for my workstation slash desktop. So I don't know. Oh, normally I run in 1440p, so all of these windows get stretched when I switch to 1080p for the streams. So let me pull this down here. 16 core, 32 thread processor. I run 64 gigs of memory, and I could have tried to push the speed, but I am at 3600. Whoops. 3600 megahertz speed. All 4 slots populated. So I have 4 16 gig sticks, but they have very, very tight timings. So to me, having really tight timings and matching the 3600 recommendation from AMD was more important than trying to get 4000 and having potential issues. So that's just a preference. But yeah, you just got to look up what's compatible, and RAM speed is really not something to focus on. Thank you so much for the answer. Absolutely, that's what we're here for. All right. I didn't think Scanlands was going to take this long, but apparently this one is really heavy on these old GPUs. So, and like this one, let's see here. This one is already past 6.5 minutes, and this is the 1660 Super. So it'll be like 7 minutes. The RTX 4090 did this in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. So just think about that a little bit. So if you're going from, you know, if you're going to save a couple $100, it's probably not going to be worth it in the long run. If you're going to save $1,000, then it may be. But once we get all these populated here, I'll show you. It just, once you start looking at electricity and time savings, sometimes the cheap card is just not worth it. So this was 6 minutes and 57 seconds for the 1660 Super. So 360, so it should be 417. Yeah. 417 seconds. So virtually 20 times slower than the 4090 running optics on this scene. 20 times. So sometimes, depending on what your use case is, saving the money up front is not going to be worth it. Let's go check in on the AMD card. This one is going even slower. It's not even quite halfway done at just under 6 minutes. So we'll give that a little time to work. I think it's still important to know, but let's go start the 1080. So the biggest thing that, again, that we're testing here is um, I really wanted to test older cards that I know a lot of people still have. So um, now keep in mind, I, I may do some EV testing soon, but keep in mind these are relatively intense cycles render scenes. Um, so it depends on what you're doing, but you may not need a brand new super expensive card anyway. And if your use case is just for rendering and your power bill isn't obnoxious, then having an embankment of older like 1080s or 1660 supers or what have you might just be a huge time saver for you. And if, like in my case, I got a bunch of my Dell desktops for free, I just had to put GPUs in them. So if you have a situation like that, adding GPUs is going to save a bunch of time. Don't shy away from stuff that's compatible with Blender and just a bit older. So I'm not here to discourage anything. I just, uh, I'll always recommend probably mid-level, newer, more efficient stuff if they have good prices on them. But um, old stuff for super cheap and super efficient, expensive new stuff are probably going to be in a battle for the best idea. So yeah, it just really depends. And I cannot believe you guys. I can't believe how slow the Scanlands is going on these cards. This one must have a lot more actual reflection, and it kind of looks like it's got some like haziness on it. I'm wondering if this scene just has a lot more complex scatter stuff going on, because it is killing these little GPUs. So if we go back and look at our results, something like the Barbershop, well, yeah, I mean, the Barbershop, we were a factor of 10, if you will, from the 4090 to the 1660 Super. So it's still a big jump, but on the Scanlands, we're a factor of 20. So imagine that if you want to render the same amount of stuff in the same amount of time with GTX 1660 Supers, you need 20 of them to match one RTX 4090. I don't know about you, but to me that's mind blowing, and that's not even considering that the 1660 Super is a 130 watt GPU. So let's just run some numbers. Um, Take that times 20. You're drawing 2600 watts to do the same work that a 450 watt 4090 does. So one card at 450 watts takes 20 seconds, or 20 of these takes 2600 watts. So that's what you have to consider. It's just where are you going to spend your money? Are you going to spend it in the hardware or in the power, or really in the time? So a lot of blah blah blah, but it's good stuff to talk about. And I think electricity and time saving stuff is a couple factors that people can overlook really easy. But all right, this one is getting close to done finally. So this is the 5600 XT. Just a few more samples, then we can record this one. Let's go back while we're waiting. Let's look at this again. So Edgar, I don't believe, ran the 7900 XTX on this benchmark frame. So we don't have the data for that. I may try to see if I can get them to run that one, because that would be good. But once these tests finally finish up, we're waiting on these two guys right here. Once these finish up, I think we should go try the 1660 Super on optics and see if these lighter scenes are any faster. I don't think they are, because the CUDA cores versus the RT cores aren't relevant on cards with no RT cores. But let's just see what we get here. So the 1080 is halfway done. All right, so the 5600 XT got done 8 minutes and 50 seconds. 8 times 60 plus 50, I said 530 seconds. 530. So a minute and almost 2 minutes slower than the 1660 Super, which I guess kind of makes sense. But let's see, our 1080 is kind of lagging behind. It's got about 100 samples left. And then just for good measure, let's go back to the classroom here with our 5600 XT to make sure that HIPRT doesn't help on this one either. It shouldn't, because there's no RT cores, and if anything, it'll take longer to build the ray tracing backend at the beginning. So let's go in here. We'll look at preferences. We'll turn on HIPRT, and we'll just see what we get. So I finished the AMD tests for tonight in general, just for everybody who's confused by all the jumping around. But what I'm doing is just doing a little bit of error correction and making sure that HIPRT and optics versus CUDA doesn't matter for these cards. And this definitely looks like it's running quick, but I don't know that it's any better than before. But we'll see. The only thing I can see being different is if HIPRT and optics have something that loads the scene faster or slower. But for non-ray tracing core cards, it shouldn't make a difference on, testing the same scene on the same GPU. But we should always back check and try to fact check ourselves, so that we don't want to be spewing any false information that makes people make a bad decision, basically. So yeah, it's kind of looking like it's going to end up the same, which is the result we want. Otherwise, our tests would all be invalid, and that would just be basically sad. All right, 50 more samples. Very interesting. But aside from PC component, what do you think about gaming laptops? And for the same spec as a PC, there will be a huge jump price. Yes, yes. If you get a laptop with the same specs as a desktop, it's going to be far worse in price. And keep in mind, if you try to run a 3080 Ti or a 4080 in a laptop, it's going to be really, really hard to cool. It's going to be loud. It's going to be heavy. So as far as what I would recommend, I think the beauty of a laptop is that you can take it and sit somewhere that you want to sit to work on the stuff you're working on. Anything that's a 3060 and higher for the GPU in your laptop is going to allow you to do a lot of work. You're not going to probably do final renders on a laptop unless that's your only computer. But, the CPUs in laptops are all 8, 10, 12 cores now and higher for mid-level and high-level computers. And I think that's awesome. So I used to hate laptops because they just couldn't keep up. There was no way. They were nowhere near a desktop. But now they're actually useful enough that you can do so much work with them. So it's another one of those. I can't give you a direct answer, but I would rather spend $2,000 on a desktop than a laptop, I guess. So it just kind of depends on, like, if you want to be sitting in a different part of your house, if you want to be sitting there watching TV working, then you're probably going to need a laptop. Um, but I would say really a good answer is they're not as far behind as they used to be. And there's a little bit of a price premium because you're also buying a screen. But keep that in mind too. You don't need That's one of the monitors that you don't have to buy then. So when you consider a good screen on a high end laptop as one of your monitors, then you've already closed that gap a lot. And having a 10,000 or 15,000 core GPU in a laptop with a 16 core CPU and enough RAM to do whatever you want, I mean, that's huge. I don't think I'd be sitting there watching TV with it on my lap. You'd still have to try to cool the thing, but they've come a long way. All right. So the 1080 finally finished this scene. 7 minutes and 34 seconds. So let's do our math here because I am too tired to do it myself. 454. So that one still behind the 1660 Super, which I find strange, but not a long way. And that one did beat the 5600 XT, um, which is kind of more what I would expect. So maybe these results make sense. But before we go off on the next tangent, because I can sit and talk and we can run some other benchmarks and stuff, but let's summarize what we found. So today's data was these three right here. So on the classroom, the 1660 Super was the winner of these three at 87 seconds. Then it was the 1080, which was 109 seconds, and then the 5600 XT at 117. Um, that's basically kind of what I would expect, except for these two. I don't know about yet. The 1080 and the 1660 Super, in my hypothesis, would have been switched. And again, I have a Founders Edition style blower 1080 and a probably better dual fan 1660 Super. So I don't know if thermal effects are coming into play there. Um, but anyway, so Barbershop results. These three here were new tonight. 5600 XT, 442 seconds, 360 seconds on the 1660 Super, and 613 on the 1080. And that was getting close to double the time of the 1660 Super. And something there is really weird to me. Uh, the other tests are closer than that. I'm not sure about that one especially. Um, unless the Touring generation cores, which are the same that the 20 series cards had, maybe those make up this difference. Uh, Otherwise, something in the barbershop scene just didn't play nice with the 1080. So again, I can't really test it unless I had a different 1080. But it's not leaking oil or anything, so I don't think the pads are bad, and it never overheats. But um, this one is the Lone Monk scene. These three here were the new results. So none of these are very awe-inspiring in general. The 1660 Super One, again, 759 seconds. Add about 90 seconds. The 5600 XT is at 850 seconds. And then coming in last, the 1080 at 900 seconds. Again, I even on this one, I was worried enough to put a little checkbox by it to say I'm not sure about that result, but um, as far as today, that's what I got. So that's all I can go off of. And then finally, the Scanlands. Similar story to the rest of the night, but they're a little closer. So 1660 Super in this test and the rest of the test won everything today. 417 seconds. Then it was the 1080, then the 5600 XT. Um, okay, so that's what we got tonight on the new cards. But if you really want to stop and look into this and think about it, you have to be able to compare the prices and the electric rates that you have. So I can't give you a one size fits all. I can probably make a 3-axis chart that shows electricity versus price versus frames per minute or hour. But even then, it's going to really be up to you to read the chart. So I think that might be overcomplicating things. But let's just Scanlands seems to be a really good test for these numbers. And actually, let's go with one of these first three. Let's go with Barbershop because I didn't have any errors, so all the cards are represented. Let's remove this. There we go. And now I can sort. Now I can sort this chart so we can put them in order. It all costs money. Yes, it does. No matter what hobby you get into, it all costs money. I like that name. I'm happy to finally see the 2080 Ti represented. Yes, I think it's one that people kind of shrugged at because it was overpriced, and I think the 11 gigs of VRAM makes it still relevant today, and the ray tracing cores in it really do play nice with Blender, which you can kind of see it's beating out the 3070 in my tests. It's what's another good example? It's considerably faster than a 6800 XT, so um, it's a good card. It's still a good card, and a lot of people have those. And on that same note, 20 series cards. I test a 2060 Super on one of the streams recently. Uh, like I mean, that's a very small card. That's super cheap used now. Even that did really well. That one beat out the 6800 XT by a bit. Bought one full price in 2018, a few months before COVID hit. It did me well. Yes, that was good. That was good timing. Um, that's about when I got my Kingpin, actually. And that is one good note. I'm glad that I thought of that right now. This one is a Kingpin, which you plug it in and it overclocks 20 to 25% higher than a stock 2080 Ti, even compared to a one-click overclock version. So, this isn't going to represent all 2080 Ti's. I mean, this thing sits at like 34 Celsius in full bore, full power use. So, um, you'd have to add a few seconds to these results to compare it to most 2080 Ti's, but still, it's definitely a relevant card. Couldn't get mine to overclock at all. Did you get a Kingpin? Oris 2080 Ti. Oh, yeah. Well, and a lot of them will come with an overclock that kind of runs automatically too. So depending on how knowledgeable you are about overclocking, they seem to ship them with most of the overclock ability built in. But I know mine, this 2080 Ti Kingpin, if I just plug it in and don't touch it, it runs at like uh 2.05 gigahertz maybe, just without touching it. And I think normally they were like 1600 or 1.6 gigahertz. But I mean, this one is made for liquid nitrogen cooling, which I probably will do with it when it's time to get rid of it, but definitely not before that. Um, but yeah, so this is a great list of comparisons here. Let's go through just a couple. Um, so these are all out of order. Let me put them in. Let me put them in order by uh, speed. So this is the barbershop scene. Um, now, some of these are very inconsistent. I think depending on how intense the ray tracing is, the 4090 will either completely decimate the 7900 XTX or it won't. Otherwise, a lot of these results were kind of what I expected. And I really like this nice scale of numbers we have here. I know it's not on a nice, pretty chart like you would see on Google Images, where they kind of put the benchmark scene behind it and list them out with that graphic. But there's plenty of data here for us to just look at. So a few notable things: the 4070 is really close to the 7900 XTX in this test. For 10 seconds, I would save the $200 or $300. Of course, significantly less VRAM. So keep that in mind. You're talking 12 on the 4070 versus uh, 24 on the 7900 XTX. So if you need the VRAM, then that makes the 7900 XTX still probably worthwhile because it is a lot cheaper. So let's start filling some of these in. And these are plus or minus, and I'm not going to put a lot of used prices. I thought the M1 processor was on par with the mid-high GPU. Why is it worse? Well, okay, so a few things to note about that test. I can't corroborate it. I do not have one of these. I know there are different sizes of the M1 and M2 processors. So this one's an 8-core GPU. I think there are some with more cores. The other thing that you have to consider is that the Metal API is kind of like HIPRT. I don't think it's fully implemented in Blender yet. So I think that's probably going to improve over time as well. But I would actually have to ask Edgar the Face, who provided these results, for more information on that. But long story short, the nothing Apple's made yet competes with a 4090 or a 7900 XTX in just pure GPU rendering speed yet. I think with mixed and well integrated processes like video editing and stuff, the Apple is a great processor, but just raw horsepower wise, I think a lot of their marketing was pretty misleading, and maybe that's a strong word. Um, but until somebody yells at me, we'll just go with misleading. Um, I think they showed that some of the newest uh, Apple GPUs were competing with a 4090. I think it was in certain tests, but um, I love overclocking. No, the Gigabyte version was legit the worst for overclocking. I bought it because I also got the motherboard with the same name, Aorus. Yeah, and my motherboard is a X570 Aorus Ultra, and I love it. And I actually all my Gigabyte cards, I really do like them. But I don't overclock. So, um, yeah, I know the one I had a Water Force that was for integrated liquid loops, not all-in-one coolers, and I actually sold that on eBay because I didn't want to deal with it. And luckily I did because uh, the materials in the cooler would react with a lot of materials that came standard in um, custom liquid loop stuff. So you had to be really careful, and a lot of those Water Force GPUs had corrosion problems. So I kind of thought I dodged a bullet on that a little, but otherwise, generally, I like Gigabyte a lot. Um, I always thought the 6750 XT was the 2080 Ti AMD equivalent. Yet I never saw the 6750 XT represented. Um, yeah, and I guess I kind of have a range. I have the 6700 and the 6800 I got lent from a friend. So the 6750 is going to be between those. The problem with that card is it costs quite a bit more than the 6700 XT, and I'm not sure that you get enough of a benefit for me to buy one at least. So if somebody else has one, I'd love to hear what their speed is. Um, but I mean, as you can see, in just rendering, my 2080 Ti is about twice as fast as my 6700 XT, and it's about 50% faster than a 6800 XT. 50% faster, depending on the test and the software and everything. So, you know, now keep in mind, again, AMD really does win the race in VRAM a lot. So if you know you need more than 11 gigabytes, you're going to have to go with a 6800 XT or start looking into really expensive NVIDIA GPUs. Or, like I've shown, Intel Arc, if you can get them at a good price, um, the A770 with 16 gigs of VRAM is competitive with the 6800 XT speed wise, but it's way cheaper. So let's fill some of these in. I think you can get these for $530 new. And I'm gonna put question marks for used price stuff again because it's just not probably fair to compare them. But if we have good data, we can fill them in at some point. So for rendering itself, getting a MacBook was a good thing or a bad thing? I know there's some applications that weren't compatible, but virtual machines can solve it. No, I think MacBooks are decent at Blender in general. I don't think that for pure rendering, the MacBook is going to compete with a standalone GPU from NVIDIA or AMD currently. Now, I don't have one. I can't test it. I do know a friend that has a high-end, I think M1 Ultra. So I'll have to ask them to test some scenes in Blender for me. But I think if you're talking about the whole process of setting up a scene, baking, animating and rendering all that together, I think the MacBook is just fine or good for Blender. I think if you're just talking about rendering, so like would I use a MacBook in a render farm? Absolutely not. If that was the only task I was doing, no. But for video editing, I have a friend that's a professional YouTuber, and he absolutely swears by MacBooks. And uh, they video edit well, they play back well. The system is integrated very very well. So I think for mixed uses they're great, but I don't have one. I can't test. So I would say that for rendering itself, getting a MacBook was a good thing or a bad thing. I don't think it's either a good or bad. I think, um, if you had a lot of rendering to do, you can add an extra GPU and a cheap desktop for that extra horsepower and keep your MacBook. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I don't think it's a bad purchase. I just don't have the experience with them to be able to use it as my daily driver to know, I guess. Hopefully that helps somewhat. I know it's just another roundabout answer, and I keep up with hardware enough, but I don't have experience using the MacBook to be able to tell you yes or no for sure. But I wouldn't say go to Best Buy and sell it right now because it's awful. I don't think that's the case at all. Okay, these are normally 370. I got mine. My A770 I actually got for $280, which is fantastic. Uh, these are normally about 320 now, I think. These are about 210. These are used, so very cheap. 1660 Super. Technically, these are like 230, but nobody should be buying those at that price. Um, if you have to get a 1660 Super, get them used because you can get them way cheaper than that. But I'm only going to list prices I know for sure that are new. And if you're going to ask, yes, these are from memory. These are not, I'm not looking these up on a different screen. I actually have all of these list prices memorized. 5600 XT, that's another used one. It's going to be about $100. 1080, don't know. Apple M1, especially don't know because I don't have any. I guess we could probably put like a billion here or something, but that'd probably be not quite true either. So sorry, that was just a little joke against Max. I just don't really know. Um, unknown. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually your name or if it's just hidden. But if you know what the M1 8-core cost, then fill me in because I'd like to put it on my list here. But uh, but yeah, I mean, there's the scale of stuff right now. So things that stick out to me are look how fast the 4070R is for only $600. Um, and especially it's nearly twice as fast as a 6800 XT, but only 70 more dollars. Plus, it uses less power, so like that's a pretty big deal. Um, other standout things, you know, the 6600 for $200 is about twice as slow or half as fast as the 6800, but the price to performance ratio is better than that. So, um, you know, a 6600 or a 6600 XT for a little over this price, maybe for 250. That's going to be a decent deal. So if you're looking for budget options, the 6600 might be a good deal. Um, but then again, keep in mind for three of these, you could buy a 4070, and that's going to be faster than three 6600s. So it's a big spider web. But what else? Let's filter this here again by speed. So we go again from now. Here's where some stuff gets interesting. This is such a fast test. This is the classroom scene. This is such a fast test that some of these results are not very useful, other than just to say, okay, it's basically instant. Because the 4090 does the classroom in 9 seconds with 300 samples. And I would say a lot of that is just loading time. Once it starts rendering, it's just basically over. And so the 4070 is almost twice as slow, if you will. But again, multiple seconds of that are loading. The same thing with the 7900 XTX. So here at least we see a little bit of high-end, brand new AMD um, competing or getting into that like basically instant. You know, it's still slower than the 4090, but in simple scenes, um, it looks like it's catching the 4090 a little bit. And keep in mind the price difference. So let's throw that up here again. Why are you mad at me there, Excel? There we go. Um, so you know, for $600 extra is not quite double the speed in a small frame. Is that worth it? I don't know. They have the same VRAM. You know, it's a harder comparison on this test, and hopefully with Blender 4 we get better drivers and HIPRT is fully implemented because it's not yet. Blender 3.6 is not fully implemented. That's why it says experimental. So if you look at this here, it still says HIPRT experimental in parentheses. So hopefully when everything's fully implemented, we'll see another bump for free on all these AMD GPUs. But we don't know yet. What else do we know? Let's just plug in a couple of these that we know just for fun. Oops. And I would list sale prices on these, but I don't think that's fair either. So these are just like what I commonly see them for, if you will. Yeah, so, but again here, interesting things. The 3070 is 3 times slower than a 4090. You can probably get a 3070 a lot cheaper than 3 times cheaper. So You know, maybe worth your while, but it's only 8 gigs of RAM. One I would look into is 2060 12 gigabyte. That may be a good buy if you can get them cheap, but they're somewhat rare. Going down the list, so a 2060 Super is about twice as slow as a 4070 or a 7900 XTX. So, um, two 2060 Supers will make up one 7900 XTX. So, depending on the price, those might be a good buy. They're not awful on power either. So, um, I'm not sure what they go for used. There aren't a lot of them new now, but what else sticks out? Yeah, but I mean, look at this 2060 Super. Yes, it's way less VRAM, but it's actually faster than the 6800 XT. 2060 KO was supreme for mid range. Yes, 2060s are good because they have those RT cores, but they're super cheap. Um, yeah, just you know, mind your VRAM, I guess. So speed is only so great until you have to run multiple render passes, because then you're doubling your render time just to be able to fit the VRAM. So keep that all in mind. But what else? Yeah. So one other big point I want to make here is if you really wish that you could upgrade from, say, your 1660 Super, so you're right around here, um, and you're really daydreaming about that $1,600 4090, you can look at this and you can go, man, it's 10 times faster, um, but it's really expensive. And at the end of the day, what are you getting out of it? So this is still a cycles render. All of these tests are in cycles. If you go start to do some EV tests, which I will do here on the channel, just not yet. I need to get some good scenes for it. Um, if you're running less intense scenes where you're not taking multiple minutes to run a scene, the 1660 Super is going to do just fine. So, showing some of these older, lower end hardware options is just to help people understand that the GPU guys are really good at selling newest, biggest, fastest, whatever, but you learn your workload. Learn what you actually need and then make a good decision after that. So, don't be so worried about trying to get up into here, because if you know you need it, you'll get it eventually. James Jones says, I'm stuck between choosing a 3080 12 gig slash 3080 Ti or a 4070. What are your thoughts on those three? All right. Let's pull up some information here and I can show you at least a speed comparison. So, oh, I don't have any of my 80 series on here, do I? Well, that's just downright inappropriate. While we're sitting here, let's go start running those because those will not take very long. But let's look at these quick. So I do have this. This is I call it my diamonds test scene. It's a 100 frame animation that tests heavy, heavy, heavy reflections. So unlike those other scenes, this is actually in minutes, not seconds. Um, it all costs money. Says 4070 if you have any intention to upscale older DirectX 8 or 9 games. Interesting. Um, yes, and some of the other features on the 4070 are nice, like the AV1 encoding. So if you are a streaming slash recording slash transcoding person, then you definitely would want the newer AV1. No one's talking about NVIDIA Remix, but I think it's going to be amazing. And what is that? Yeah, I haven't heard about it, so apparently it's not talked about enough for me to see it either. Yeah, AV1 is nice. AV1 I can run. Actually, that's kind of the only reason I can run streams at home at all. I mean, I'm looking at my OBS stats and I've only dropped not even 400 frames out of a 250,000 frames since I've streamed tonight. And a big part of that is I'm only at like 2.2 megabits per second of bitrate. And for even for 720p, which is what I'm streaming now, that used to not be anywhere near possible. RTX Remix allows modders to easily capture game assets, automatically enhance materials with powerful AI tools, and quickly create stunning RTX remasters with ray tracing and DLSS. Oh, that is very cool. Portal RT. Yeah, okay. So it's a tool to help you port games into modern rendering processes, basically. But you can do it on your own. Yeah, that is pretty cool. I haven't heard of that. I spend enough time playing with like NVIDIA Canvas and stuff. Something where you can just reskin a game is even cooler. But James Jones, to answer your question on a pure speed comparison, so this is a very large, very long test. So these are about an hour and 15 minutes. Here's the range of cards you were asking about. So the 4070 is just about 10 or 15 or 20% slower than the 3080 Ti. May I post the direct link? I think you can. I think you can as long as it doesn't go to something dangerous. But I honestly, posting direct links in here may not work. YouTube might not let you. So, if it doesn't work and anybody who hears this or sees this is interested, maybe just leave a comment on the stream, like a normal video comment, and you could probably post it in there. Otherwise, if you want, I can share it. Maybe we can do a little video and talk about it, but yeah, I don't know. Go ahead and try it if you want to. I just am not sure if it works. Oh, have to be a moderator to post links. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Can you type it as a dead link and then it won't figure out it's a link? Um, 20, 50 to 85? 200. Okay. I attempted. Okay, well, yeah, for now just I guess remember to leave a comment and we can talk about it, but the 3080 Ti is faster than the 3090. Yeah, but it's only by a few minutes and this is a 100 frame animation. So, the 3080 Ti and the 3090 are very similar except for the VRAM. So basically what you should see there is this is a very good 3080 Ti and a relatively not as good 3090. But that margin of error is small enough that they're going to overlap. So hopefully that makes sense. But they're only a couple hundred CUDA cores different. And like for instance, my 3080 Ti is a For the Win 3 model EVGA, and my 3090 is a ICX3 one. So it's just variation. But on this side here, just to help you compare, so these are your speed comparisons. These are the power design numbers for each of the cards. So you're closer to 300 or 350 watts to get those 30 series cards. The 4070, which matches the 12 gigs of VRAM of the 80 Ti and the 3080 12 gig, is only 200 watts. So just keep that in mind. And along with that, wattage is less, but you're also going to have um, a smaller GPU. So you can easily get a 4070 that fits in a normal size case, but good luck cramming a uh, overclockable 3080 Ti into a normal case. So just another thing to think about. That's that one that people overlook a lot. But while we're doing this, I think since I don't have them, let's go run some of these um, on my 30 series rig. So I'm going to close out of some of these guys. We got our results for the 3 lower end cards. Let's make sure we close them. If you don't close out, so that's one thing about um, having all these extra machines is you have to remember to turn them off or they sit there and idle. And with 12 machines just idling, it actually uses a lot of power. But let's remote in to render 11. Let's go check it out. Forgot about case size. Facepalm. Yep. Yeah, and that's why direct answers in computer hardware are just really hard to come by because um, cost, power draw, case size. There's so many factors um, that just really make a difference. All right. So this one, for anyone who didn't see it earlier, this machine is it's a 5800X CPU. I recently upgraded it to have plenty of cores to manage all of this. It's got 32 gigs of system RAM at 3600 megahertz, and it's very tight timings as well. This is a high-end kit. All my RAM kits on these machines with newer processors are very tight RAM kits. By that I mean the CL number. And then I have 3 30 series GPUs, 2 3080 Ti's and one 3080. These are on mining risers. So these are on one lane USB risers that plug into the motherboard via a USB cable and an adapter. Now, people will say, doesn't that bottleneck it? And normally, no. In really intense scenes, it won't matter because the time to load is very small compared to the time to run the test. So, where it's going to matter is where, like in the classroom scene, we might see some really slow loading at the beginning and then it'll run. But I think you'll see it won't really matter. And I tested a 3090 on one of these one lane risers versus a direct in the motherboard, and it's only like a 3 to 7% bottleneck on a short scene. So it shouldn't really matter too much, but um your power company says either drugs or crypto, either way bank account go brrr. Yeah, well, no, I wish. Um right now mining's not any good, I'll just say that, but I am surprised they haven't shown up before and just like, hey, we have a couple questions. But I think I replied to a comment somewhere. Somebody asked how much power I use, and at the peak of my mining, we'll not call it a career, but at the peak of my time mining, I was drawing 6,000 watts conservatively, probably 7,000 just on the mining rigs, and not including like my desktop or my wife's desktop. So, needless to say, I had to add some air conditioners in the basement. But guess I'll go with the 4070. It's newer, more features, and can find them open box for about 550. Yeah. Yeah, I think the 4070 is a great card. It's small, it's fast, it has AV1. There's a lot that you would have to do to convince me it's a bad card, I guess. Amazing rig. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that I did do all the mining I did because it paid all these cards off back when it was worth the money. And now I can just sit here and test these things and I can render my scenes. Um, Yikes! Yes, yikes is the reaction to have here. Um, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of power and a lot of heat to get rid of. I'm sad I went from 2080 Ti to 3090. Should have waited for 4070. I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, I don't think you should be sad. I have two 3090s and they still rip, man. They're still really good cards. They are hot, but 24 gigs of VRAM and um, very fast card. You really can't go wrong with them. So I wouldn't regret it at very least. But um, yeah, there's always wheeling and dealing to be done too. Um, but I really want remix. So you have to have a 4000 series or higher to do that then, huh? What feature on the GPU allows it? James Jones says, anything is an upgrade for me. Now I have a 5600 XT. Yeah, it's not a bad card, but it's definitely nice to have some RT cores. Yeah, 3 to 4 years is a long lifespan. If just with how fast things advance, um, feature sets tend to leave the hardware behind, especially if you're an AMD user. So anything with RT cores is going to be good, but um, yeah, I mean, going from a 5600 XT to a 4070 is going to be a massive change. So, and really, if you wanted to, there's plenty of options between those two that would really make a big deal too. But yeah, I mean, like anything else in this stuff, if you got questions or you want to know something specific, let me know. You know where I am. Ran 1440p decent with optimized settings. Yep, yep. And just like I've said, um, the the hardware companies are very good at selling us on, you need the best and the newest just to be able to run 1440p. Well, no, you don't. You need it to be able to run 1440p with insane settings. But if you tone them down just a little, then you can get away with a lot. So, yep, they definitely want you to feel the pressure, and um, you can sure do a lot with less than they want you to think. Yeah, it all costs money. Says going from a 5600 XT to a 4070 is going to be life changing. It's going to be big, a big change. But really, even if you went to like uh 6700 XT, it's gonna be a pretty big difference because all the ray tracing stuff that you get out of it. But um, graphics snob. My primary monitor is a 5120 by 1440, 240 hertz, 49-inch. Nice. Nice. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I am on a 2560 by 1440 at 165. What is mine? 31 and a half inches. It's an MSI mag series. I like it. I should probably be on 4K, but I can't stream it anyway, and it takes too much resource to record. So it's kind of silly to have 4K anyway. Um, I was amazed at the settings that made no noticeable difference but destroyed performance. Yes. Things like um, chromatic aberration and screen shake and what are some of those? Like film grain and some of those silly ones. They're just absolutely ridiculous. But okay, so I think what we should do right here, let's demonstrate this. So if you look in my preferences here, we're using optics. I have both 3080 Ti's and the 3080 selected. So we are going to render this image, okay? And we're gonna just take like a little mental note of how long this takes. Um, okay, so see it's taking just a few seconds to load, but keep in mind it always does on this scene. It's a big scene. So the risers may or may not matter. Um, let's see. It all costs money says my dream monitor is a 31-inch 4K OLED 240 hertz 1000 R curve with Dolby Vision. Yeah, yeah, but you know, in like 2 years, that's going to be like they'll be like laughing at that, and they'll say, "Well, you need 8K. What are you doing?" So sooner or later, it'll be affordable. Correction, 32-inch. Well, there you go. Hey, it's got to be the right thing. If it's going to be your dream monitor, it's got to be exactly right. Motion blur, SSAO, yeah. I mean, basically all the little check boxes that you can't really tell what they do are gonna kill your performance. But um, anyway, yeah. So all right, so this was all three GPUs. Let's just call it 49 seconds, okay? So this is an issue that I was discussing with somebody in the chat earlier. Let me see who it was. I'm not sure if they're still here or not. Edgardo Palladino said, "How come when I render with all of my GPUs at once, it runs at the same speed as a single?" Um, so basically, he was doing this. So he had all his cards checked on. He would run it. It would get a time. Well, now watch if I just take off two of these and rerun this scene. The scaling is not linear at all. So we'll let this run. Um, Rob says, when you render multiple machines to an NAS using placeholders, how often do you get duplicates? And with how many GPUs do you usually run at once? Okay, once we finish this little comparison, I will show you. So what I don't use an NAS per se. I use just a desktop with a shared folder, which is essentially the same thing. It's just nowhere near as stable as an NAS. Um, my storage PC has, I think there are four 2 terabyte spinners that are tied in a RAID 0. So there's no redundancy, but it's really just for computation. So um, saving and loading the files doesn't bottleneck anything. And then when they're done, I move them onto a safer machine like my desktop for processing. But um, when you render multiple machines to an NAS using placeholders, how often do you get duplicates? I don't actually get any duplicates, and I'll show you how I set it up so that I don't. Um, but basically, there's just the two checkboxes there that really make the difference. So I'll show you the settings I use, and we can actually run a little test demo if you guys want to do that too, just to demonstrate how my render farm is set up. But okay, I think I actually ran this test a little bit earlier, kind of the same way. But so the first test we ran all three of these heavy hitter GPUs. We got 50 seconds, like 49 seconds. Well, with just one of them, this is a minute and 41 seconds. So, more or less, one GPU was only 2 times slower than three GPUs. So that's not linear. There's some amount of a bottlenecking that happens when you run all of the GPUs together. So, let's demonstrate this the right way. I'm actually going to open 3 iterations of Blender. And let's, how should we do this so that it's a proper demonstration? So, on your Windows PCs, you can open Blender as many times as you want. It's not going to cause a problem. And just FYI, the same scene is shared on that storage computer. Um, so I'm just opening multiple iterations of it. Sorry for the stuttering there. Um, but let's pull these into kind of thirds so that I can start them all at the same time. But hopefully, so I have three of the same thing open. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I'm gonna just set up number 1, number 2, and number 3 GPUs on each one of these machines. So basically each iteration of Blender gets 1 GPU. Okay? And then all I'm going to do is we're set on frame 100 for each one of these. And then task manager's ready. So I'm just going to come in here and render each one of these as fast as I can, hopefully, so that we don't lose any activity. But you guys can watch here. We can watch the specs load up. Did I miss one? Of course, the actual render tiles are not all visible at once. Hold on, I'm trying to click through all these. We may just have to let them run and read them at the end. But basically, all three of these GPUs are running right now, supposedly, which we'll check. And it looks like this was actually intense enough to fill the system RAM, which doesn't surprise me because the file is so large. So running multiple versions of this same file is probably pretty intense. But yeah, I mean, we're hitting the CPU fairly hard here. The memory is pretty full. So let's go look at our render results here. So basically, this one will be done here soon. It looks like this might be the one with the 3080, and it's going real slow. Oh, you know what I did? I didn't open them the right way. Because yep, oops. 2 of these are running on CPU. Hold on, sorry. I was going to say those are taking way too long. It's going to make my test wrong. Yeah, these need to be set to GPU compute, not CPU. And that is our problem. So render image. That would also explain why our system RAM was full, because the CPU was doing the processing. Okay. Now we're good. So now you can see all 3 of these GPUs are starting. Okay, they're all getting full use, or 85 to 90% use. The CPU is not being fully utilized, and the RAM is not full, okay? So nothing else on the machine should be bottlenecking the rendering. We can try to check that by previewing these. And it kind of looks like we actually lost one of our blenders. Maybe, maybe not. Well, let's see. Let's see what this runs at. It kind of looks like one of them might have crashed out. And it's possible that we just ran out of system memory, but generally when you run GPUs in Windows, they recommend you have system memory that's 2 times as much as your GPU memory. So running 3 of these separately probably is pushing that rule by quite a bit. But the main point here, if you look at these render times, one of them ran 1 minute and 25 seconds. The other one ran 1 minute 10 seconds. So running these separately, they're still rendering closer to their full potential separately. But if we combine them, then the benefit of multiple GPUs is basically not there anymore. That's the point I'm trying to make. So in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to show, which I'm not doing a great job of at the moment, is if you go buy a mining rig with 8 GPUs plugged into it, you're probably not going to be able to run Blender renders effectively. So you're going to want to focus on render machines that have 1 or 2 GPUs and plenty of system RAM. Yeah, it is weird. Thank you for bearing with me on that. I think you know what I'm saying though. It would probably be better to test that with 8 gig GPUs, and I don't have a rig with 4 of them on there yet, like currently. Otherwise, we can obviously test it in lighter weight scenes, but that's not going to help prove our point. But if you guys are interested in seeing more about it, I compared a 4090 versus dual 3090. I had that in a video a while ago. That's a good example of that happening, or it could be. So I think I addressed it in there a little bit. But yeah, so now let's talk about how I actually render. So if I'm going to render an animation, let's say I'm going to run render 11 because it's already open. Render 1 has my 4070. We'll connect to that. Render 4 we were just using, that's the 5600 XT. So we'll let all of those connect real quick. And they'll kind of just open here as they will. If you look at my hardware network, basically what I've got on every computer in my network, I have this compute drive, which I call storage server 1. And that's just a RAID 0 disk, which is 4 hard drives that act as 1 hard drive. That way it's 4 times faster and 4 times larger than a single hard drive. But that one is 8 terabytes. So I think I can show that here. Well, 7 1/4. You get a lot of losses when you're using a RAID configuration. But word of caution, be careful using that because there's 0 redundancy. So if one of the 4 hard drives dies, then all of my data that's on there is dead. It's just gone. You can't recover it. But I have an 8 terabyte drive that's 4 times faster than a normal hard drive. So all of my render files are stored in there. So let's just look at, let's see, what's a good one? Try to find one that's not awfully heavy. We could do this fluids one. No, that's not the actual file. Hold on. High velocity fluids. This is a good one. Let's just start a new folder for example frames, okay? And then this should work fine in current Blender, but we'll see because it was built in an older version, and I know Flip Fluids doesn't always convert. So sometimes you have to rebake it. When you render multiple machines to a NAS, yeah, okay, we're getting to that. Sorry for the later reply. Internet went dead, and yes, this is my name because I'm going anon. Okay, well that's fine. I just thought that you were probably one of millions of people to get the name unknown, and that was pretty crazy. So I just had to ask. The M1 8-core GPU could go up to 1400 in my country, and that's a 13-inch. Wow. Okay. So it's pretty expensive. All right. So we're on render 1. Let's just see if this file opens properly. Flip fluids may or may not cooperate, but we will see. Basically, with a fluid cache that's been baked, uh, if the software version is different, the add-on may not read it properly. And it looks like this actually is working just fine. You can see the whitewater particles. So that should be fine. But these frames don't take a super long time to render, so I figured we would use these. And actually, though, how come we are set to Eevee right now? That's pretty weird. Edgar the Face, hey! Um, I've been talking about you tonight. I finally got a bunch of your benchmark information put onto my spreadsheets. Everyone who is in here and who hears this later, Edgar the Face just joined the chat. This is the person who shared with me 7900 XTX, the Apple M1 data, some other CPU data. So I've been incorporating that into the little folder I have set up with information. So welcome to the stream. I'm glad you're here. We are currently trying to find a good scene to demonstrate the render farm setup here. I think let's just use this one. This is the diamond scene. And this is one, once I figure out how to bake these fluid sims to, or to save them to Alembic files, I'm going to share this one so people can run it. And this will be on the Patreon, just like the other things I'll share. It'll be free on there so people can run it and then report their results back if they want to. But let's just call this test for live. And then diamonds. When have I run this last? Let's just try the normal diamond scene. See what happens. So we'll just start a few of these frames. The first frames are not as intense because the reflections aren't they're not all there because there's no objects falling into the water. So it should be a good one. But here you can see this is the 4070 on optics. Render setup. So like I was saying, I have a shared folder. So inside of this compute drive, I have a file for this diamonds test scene, and then I made a folder for our what did I call it? Live test for live. So that's one we're going to use. So on the output settings, what I need to do is I come down here, output. I have to select the right folder, which is going to be our test for live folder. I'll hit accept. And then here I might just go ahead and save because that setting will apply when I open the file next, which is the beauty of saving and sharing the same file. You only have to change settings once without linking. So nothing's linked. It's just the same thing opened multiple times. And then the two things I do is I turn off overwrite and I turn on placeholders. Okay, now Rob, when you asked, you probably already knew this, but yeah, I just have placeholders turned on. Okay, so now what I can do is I can just go in here and start the animation. Okay, and then I always give it just a second to make sure it starts working. And it looks like we're scooting along just fine, so I'll minimize that. This is render 4, which is an AMD machine. That shouldn't be a problem. So I'll open Blender 3.6 on here. The only thing that I have noticed a difference in before is sometimes it seems like when I mix AMD and NVIDIA, just a certain every so many frames is flickery. And it's not a significant amount of the frames, so I haven't been able to figure out why or what. But I use Open Image Denoiser for both GPU types. so that I'm not like doing one on optics and one on open image. So not entirely sure why that happens. But yeah, so now see, this is on frame 3 because the 4070 had already done frame 2. But let's have even more fun, if we can call it fun. And let's open let's open this file. Let's just go for it. Let's try 3. Let's try 3 on the render 11 machine. Okay, and we're just going to open diamonds on all 3 of these iterations. The reason it didn't work for the Barbershop test is I think it just has too much RAM and VRAM requirement. It's just too big. Okay, so this one already loaded the test for live file, so we're good to go there. I am going to go back through these in order though, otherwise I'm going to forget which one's which. So now I'm gonna set up optics on each GPU separately and then just start rendering. Okay, so again, this is to avoid the scaling problem, which I'm not sure how to fix or why it's happening. But you can see every time I open one of these, it's starting on a new frame. So even though it's the same machine, the files aren't talking to each other. The placeholder setting is preventing them from overlapping. And this one should be the 3080. Render animation. Okay, now let's sit here and watch and see if this guy starts up all of these. Looks like it's loading the render kernels, which it tends to. The first time when you open Blender with new hardware on new versions of Blender, if you will. So here we'll be particularly interested in watching our RAM and CPU. And this one, because there were a lot of questions about the old CPU I had in here was not big enough. Actually, it was an old motherboard and CPU combo. They weren't hefty enough to handle rendering multiple GPUs. So I swapped out this one with a 5800X. So 8 core, 16 thread should be plenty for 3 or 4 GPUs in GPU rendering. And then I have the 32 gigs of system RAM here. So you'll kind of see over the next minute or two, these GPUs will all start going. Looks like our 3080 Ti's are running, and the 3080 should start up in a minute. So it looks like it's still loading those render kernels. And there we go. So here's frame 5, 7, and 8. Okay, so now what I can do is let's minimize that. Now this is my workstation. So let's go to the server, compute files, regular diamonds, test for live. Again, same exact folder that they all see. So let's get this preview to be a little bit bigger. One problem with having completely blank white file browser is I can't see the lines. And then let's leave it like that so we can see the file size change. There we go. So over here, obviously completed frames have a file size. Placeholders are 0, but that means they're in progress. So turning off the overwrite makes these not overlap. So Rob, when you say rendering on multiple machines to an NAS using placeholders, how often do I get duplicates? I never do. I get 0 duplicates ever. Sometimes if a machine crashes, I will I'll have to come delete a 0 size frame basically the next day or whenever the render's done and rerun that frame. That happens occasionally. But most normally, no duplicates. So, and again, settings for that are um, placeholders checked on, overwrite turned off. And then as long as your file path is set up right, you shouldn't have any problems. And an NAS should work the same way as my setup does. So I don't think we have any issues there. Let's look at our file browser here. I'm just curious, how many GPUs have you ran at the same time this way? Oh, let me think about it. Well, let's go back to my little inventory list here. So if I go all the way to the left tab here, this is not up to date, but this is probably approximately right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, normally 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'd say between 12 and 15 GPUs have been run on a machine or on different machines before. So I had a couple fluid simulations that I tried out that were like 3 or 4,000 frames, and they were, you know, a couple minutes a piece on one GPU. So I threw all of my machines at it. I think it took like 8 hours maybe, and but you know, that's the point of it, I guess, is having all these GPUs. Is I can grind through stuff that would take a month on one machine. But yeah, so I'd say a max probably 15 GPUs. Now, like I said, every now and then you get a frame that is it looks a little different, it's flickery, or you get a zero size file that never goes away. So I have to go back through them afterward and make sure that nothing changed. But theoretically, as long as you're using the same render API or engine, the same engine, so like cycles, all of the GPUs can use cycles. As long as I'm using cycles for everything and I use the same denoiser for everything, I should get frames that look the same. As long as I don't have, you know, mismatching amounts of noise from frame to frame, because that would cause the flickering that you can see. But you know, just scrolling through these quick, which is also really hard to do because Windows doesn't load them fast enough. Um, but like a good example here is watch this top left cube here that has this kind of teal color. Just in the first couple frames, it definitely has some flickering lighting, and it may just be because that's where the lights hit it. But you know, something like that can look like a rendering bug. So you know, there's hangups with it too, and rendering without um, rendering without software that controls noise between frames, which Blender doesn't have yet, or it may never have, will prevent you from finding those flickery, weird things. So you either have to render perfect frames, which is very time consuming and energy intensive, or you have to make sure your settings are tuned in. But weird question. Do you have to split your setup onto different breakers? I remember the US outlets being quite fiddly. Okay, so all of these machines, so my desktop is out in the basement in the main, like, the main, like, not the main floor, the main rooms that you would sit in the basement. And then there's a utility closet where my air filter, my heater, my water softener, that stuff is all in there. I have a friend that's a career electrician, like fully professionally certified electrician. I had him come install 6 outlets just in that utility room, and then I have some big metal shelves in there. So if you've seen my short that has like 42,000 views about the render farm, that's how a lot of people find my channel. If you've seen that picture, that's basically what's going on there. I have 6 outlets that are 20 amp each at 110 volt. So let me do the math here. 110 times 20 is 2200 watts, not including inefficiency. So I think he told me to take that times about, what did he say, 80% at most. So I get about 1760 watts per outlet, and I have 6 of them just for this. So theoretically, I have about 10,500 watts available for rendering down there. Plus my desktop and my wife's desktop are both high-end PCs, so I can throw those on. Like if somebody actually booked my rendering service on Patreon and I needed like as many frames as I could manage, then I would throw all these on. But yes, separate breakers. I don't have any 440. Everything's 110 in here. I might have my friend add some 440s out in the barn. I have an outbuilding that has power access. I may add some in there, but don't really want the kids around 440 just because it's you know, you go from maybe injured a little bit to basically automatically dead with 440, so don't want to mess with it too much. But yes, it is obnoxious. And at the height of my mining time, all of these things were running at all times. So 7,000, 7,500 watts continuous draw all day long. Like somebody was asking earlier how the police didn't decide to show up just to see what I was doing. And I've wondered the same thing for a long time. Because I think normally they start flying helicopters by your house just to see if your windows are hot. Because they don't know what you're doing. But never happened so far. Yeah, somebody asked that in the comments just a bit ago. Um, which I think is just really funny because I mean they don't go out of their way to come bother you here or anything, but if anybody on my entire corner of the county was suspicious power use wise, it would be me. Um, Thank you for the multi GPU demo. What do you do with all this render power? So well, okay, that's a great question. So I would say most of the time they just idle because imagine how much scene setup and animation it takes to actually need this much render power. So basically, these machines go back and forth from some mining to rendering machines, and I'm in the process of building more scenes to render myself. So a lot of my character work, once I get a bunch of animations done, I'll have some cool simulations. It's mostly for rendering my own projects. I do intend to sell the rendering power someday, hopefully. If I can get a couple, maybe little studios or something where they would rather just pay somebody else to render the scenes instead of buying all the hardware themselves. I'll do that eventually. But yeah, I'm kind of in the process of learning to generate cool scenes and simulations that I render myself. So ultimately, my goal with mining and now this was to get a render farm. So when mining started to be popular again, so this would have been early 2021. I had one 2060 Super in my pre-built desktop, and that was all I had. And I mean, you guys have seen the hardware list. I also have probably 18 AMD GPUs that are not being used for rendering, and those ones still mine to this day. So, but I just every month or two, each card I would buy would pay itself off with the mining, and I took it as the opportunity of a lifetime to be able to build this render farm. which had been the goal, but I just, I was not going to be able to just outright buy it anytime soon. So I saw the opportunity. I aggressively purchased hardware. As it would pay itself off, I would get more, and uh, and that's how I got to where I am. So yeah. So basically, currently, I can't use all this power on my own. Trying to sell some of it. Um, Eventually, I hope to need all of this power because I really want to be making animations at this pace. Uh, but I mean, we're 70 frames in to my diamond test scene, and I only have 3 machines running, not even including my 4090. And I mean, we're about to be done with this thing here in the span of 20 minutes. So, um, you know, I can probably triple this speed. So you got to figure every every 20 minutes I can probably get 300 frames done at this quality of frame. So, if you know an animator that can keep up with that rendering speed, then send them my way because I definitely need more animating than I do rendering at this point. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the really long, too many word answer for what do I do with this. And if you guys have seen my character stuff, that's what I really like to do with Blender. I think I like building characters. I wouldn't say I'm good at it or anything like that. Um, I'm working on that. But eventually, being able to build scenes, characters, do simulations, and all that stuff, all on my own, is just kind of the end goal. So, you know, I'll probably start posting a bunch of YouTube shorts just to help grow the channel, and I can run some like fluid sims and cloth sims pretty quick. So, for stuff like that where baking and animating isn't too long, but rendering takes a while, this is gonna be put to use for that. Um, but yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Very, very complicated response, I know, but I love talking about it. I love working with computers. 3 years ago, I didn't do anything with the computer, like at all, except for at work, just to do my work. And I got a bit of a bug, and it's grown into just a complete obsession. And over the course of the last year and a half on my YouTube channel, I realized that Blender users and 3D artists have an innate need to understand computers at least a little. So I realized that the hardware stuff and the Blender stuff go hand in hand because you have to be able to maintain and use the computer properly to be able to do this 3D work. So yeah, so that's kind of a history of all of it. But um, yeah. Here, Edgar, see, you got little call outs on the spreadsheet. I still have to add some hardware. Um, Actually, though, Edgar the face, there is a question we were talking about earlier. Um, is the Apple M1 8-core GPU is that actually this much slower than other things? Like, I mean, this is 10 times slower than a 6800 XT. So I was looking at your comments from a couple weeks ago, Edgar, and it just seems to me like having having that much of a slowdown on the Apple doesn't make sense. But was this the CPU and not the GPU? I could pull up the comment just so we're working off the same info. But I was just curious because I don't know as much about the Apple's hardware. So hopefully, if you're still here, you can answer that. But uh, not not like you're being questioned. I'm just not familiar. So All right. Yeah. Yeah. So eventually, ideally, I'll have a whole bunch of characters and I'll know how to make some scenery, and then I'll know how to do all of the simulation that, that is necessary. I don't doing too much with cloth and fluids and stuff all at the same time. It's very, very taxing, and you have to do things in the right order and stuff. So I'm gonna try to find ways to not do simulations where I can, and then I'll do them where they're needed. But oh, okay. Edgar says yes. That's only the baseline M1 GPU. It's a beefed up tablet APU. The M1 Pro, Max, and Ultra are different beasts. Ah, okay, okay, that makes more sense. Um, we had talked about it earlier. I'm scrolling through. I don't remember who had talked about it, but that makes a lot more sense. You have like 40 to 70 GPU cores on the bigger Apple silicons, and this one is 8. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, the M1 8 core is a relatively small. So it's kind of like a AMD Vega mobile that's attached to a CPU. It's just a smaller version of it. Probably the same architecture, but just a tiny bit of the chip. That makes a lot of sense. Um, very cool. Let's see, what else do we have? I think so. We've seen plenty of the diamond scene. Six. Yes. Okay. Edgar says you didn't include my Radeon 680M results. I am going to. I was typing these in before the stream today, and I kind of ran out of time. The the like 5 minutes left that I had was it wasn't enough time for my brain to read the numbers. So I said I'll do it for the next one because I'll probably do another one of these end of the week or early next week. Um, but I didn't want to get the numbers wrong, so I skipped them for now. But yes, Edgar has provided, and you had CPU benchmarks, so I'll include those. Then there's no reason not to. Data is data, but we can show people why CPU rendering is not worth it. Um, let's see. But what I want to do right now, because if you go back and look at the Classroom, Barbershop, Lone Monk, and Scanlands, I don't have the 3080 Ti's benchmarked in here, and I think that is really good information to have. So I'm going to go ahead and run those right now. 3080, and we're just going to do one at a time because I don't want to deal with the uh, scaling problem. Let's see, where is my? Got to pin that menu. Um, yeah, so whatever the scaling problem is has been a nightmare with multi GPU setups. But um, we'll just do one at a time, and these are so fast relatively that it's not going to matter. What do we got? Let's get rid of most of these renders. And as most of you have seen, we've beat the diamond scene to death basically. So until I get new GPUs to throw at it, I'm not going to worry about running it all the time. Um, but yeah, let's do a classroom render on the 3080 Ti. Yeah, and I don't have the 3090s ran on here either. And I do actually own a 3070 Ti, so I can test that. I just haven't. But let's just run through these since we're sitting here. And these will go really, really fast because they're quite a bit faster than the GPUs we were just testing. But I just realized today I don't have them. I don't have them on the list, so probably be good. So we're just going to pick the top 3080 Ti. Don't know if one's better or worse. It shouldn't be. On optics, render image. And this should be somewhere in that 16 or 17 second ballpark to match the 4070 if future results hold up. And looks like it's going to be right in there. So 18.3 seconds. So let's log that. Yeah, so that's just a little bit faster than, yeah, it's about 5.5 times faster than the GTX 1080 from the test earlier. So quite a bit different. And then all we got to do is switch this to the 3080. Render image. Should be just a little slower. And again, this is one of those scenes that, you know, it's small enough that it's probably error prone, but 18.8 seconds. So like these results, I would say they're basically the same result. But yeah, that's crazy. We're already done with Classroom, so on to Barbershop. Yes. Go back to open. And for anyone who doesn't know, these scenes are all available on the Blender website. They're under downloads. So if you wanted to go test them yourself or check them out, they're free and they're available. But they're what everybody uses to compare, so it's good to know. Let's run the 3080 Ti again. This one should take slightly longer, but still not very much. Yeah, just a little bit of a surprise 30 series sprinkled in there. Yeah, so this scene is definitely a little bit slower, but this is a good example of a nice heavy scene with a lot of ray tracing stuff. So some scenes are not as ray trace heavy, and the differences between non-ray tracing GPUs and ray tracing GPUs, and the difference between honestly NVIDIA and AMD, those differences shine a lot more when you get these really heavy, volumetric, reflection heavy. Um, what else? Like a lot of light sources, that kind of stuff. You start adding in all that ray tracing complexity, and bigger GPUs with more RT cores um, will just eat through it, and small ones really fall off. So on some tests, a 2060 will scale with a 4090 fairly well. On other tests, the 2060 just takes forever, where the 4090 just chews through it. So that's why in the future I'm excited to see what honestly all three brands come up with, because if they come up with ways to speed the RT up even more, or like they're going to have hardware denoisers, you know, that kind of stuff's going to make a huge difference. But a minute and 42 seconds, we'll just round it up. So this is the RTX 3080 Ti. A minute. What did I say again? A minute 42. So 102 seconds. Optics. We'll fill these in right now. RTX 3080, no TI. Boom. We'll go run that guy real quick. And here's another case of decent 3080 Ti versus really good 3080. I think this 3080 is my for the win model from EVGA. So it's going to keep up better with a run of the mill 3080 Ti. So it's all part of that error, you know. You always have to take benchmarks like these with a pinch of salt. but I think you'll see that this won't be very much slower than the other one was. And that's just because it on its own it clocks higher than a stock one. So when you start to look at a 3080 versus a 3070 Ti versus a 3080 12 gig, you can get into the weeds pretty far, but you're probably going to have a really similar experience between GPUs that are that close in range. So a bigger upgrade would be to wait and go to a newer generation instead of going up just a sub level to go from a 70 series to a 80 series or what have you. And this one's about done. This one's going to make a case for actually beating the 3080 Ti. Ha! Yep. Um, by about 20 seconds, actually. So, a minute 21 and a half. So, that is very interesting. So, this is 80, 81.5 approximately. So, yeah, 20 seconds faster. The 3080 was actually faster than the 3080 Ti in this test, which is fairly weird, but again, good 3080, average 3080 Ti. So, 20 seconds difference on one frame, it matters, but basically the conclusion you can draw from that is they're very close. So they're very close to each other. All other things being equal, Silicon Lottery is going to determine how your card does more than an 80 versus an 80 Ti. So at that point, it comes down to price comparisons and brand availability and stuff like that. But let's try the Lone Monk scene. This one should be more interesting because this one tends to have the potential for issues. So let's start with our 3080 Ti there again on the top one. And I'd say let's run the other 3080 Ti just to see, but let's not complicate it. So we're going to do the top one and then the 3080. Render image. This one probably will have to take a second to load render kernels. And one other thing I just thought, that barbershop scene in the last one, I wonder if a bunch of the time for the 3080 Ti was loading the render kernels. So I know I go through this exercise every time I run these scenes, but I might have to hop back over there and check it real quick. Definitely don't want to be misleading anybody. Yeah, the Lone Monk scene always takes a long time to load. Um, yeah. Actually, I wonder if we look at Task Manager, I wonder if we can tell what part of the machine is thinking for so long. Kind of think it might just be Blender. It looks like we have um, one core at a time that's really thinking more. So Blender must just take a while to kind of compile the shaders. So here, again, like I do normally, and I kind of forgot to on the barbershop scene for these. Normally, I'll let the render kernels finish loading first, and then see now it's going to start rendering, but it's already logged a minute and 43 seconds of render time. That's obviously not the case, and this only happens the first time you run this scene on this version of Blender with this GPU. So, or with this machine. So I need to cancel this because it's not a good result. and then just restart it. And now you don't have to reload the render kernels. And now it just starts. See? So I need to go back to the barbershop real fast after this and rerun the 3080 Ti because that explains a lot of our error. Yeah, and this one's going to take a little bit. So what is this? Blender 3.5. Yep, we don't want that. We want 3.6. So let's be just a little spontaneous here. Oh, no, we can't. We got to wait. I was going to go back and run Barbershop separately, but this is the GPU we want to do it on. But that's okay. This isn't going to take very long. And just, I mean, look how much faster this is than like the cards we ran earlier. It's just a night and day difference. So if you could only pick one GPU to render with, you know, one big beefy one is just always going to be a much more user friendly experience than a whole bunch of cheap little ones. Sometimes it just depends on what you can get and where you're at, but if you have the choice, get one big one, not a bunch of tiny ones. Let's see how this is doing. 59 degrees. Looks like it's doing pretty good. I always just check when stuff has been rendering for a few minutes, just to make sure nothing's getting too hot. Because rendering's not full bore 100% hot all the time, but if your GPUs are enclosed in hot cases, you know, they're gonna get warm, they're gonna wear out. The one thing I've had a lot of, which people don't know about, is the thermal pads leaking oil. So when they get hot for long enough, the thermal pads and GPUs will actually compress and kind of sort of melt, and they drop oil that's like a yellow color. It's very sticky and thick, but it doesn't conduct electricity. So um, that's not a lot of fun to find in your case, though. I had a mining rig case that I opened up to maintain, and there were pools of oil in the bottom, and I didn't know what it was, so I freaked out and had to Google it. But basically, I thought I had killed like 6 or 7 of these cards. But yeah, it just turns out it apparently they just dribble oil. So if you have that happen, don't worry. All right, 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Let's note that before we go back. RTX 3080 Ti, 3 minutes and 6 seconds. 186. I can do that one in my head. Okay. And then let's go back to the barbershop and review this 3080 Ti result, because that is suspicious. We'll leave this scene open and just open the barbershop also. That way we're not rendering it, but it's ready to go for the 3080. All right. Switch to GPU, edit preferences, 3080 Ti, render image. Now we just need to make sure it doesn't compile shaders for a long time, because I think that's what made it so long last time. So building the optics structure, that stuff should take a long time every time, but loading render kernels is what it'll say. That should only happen once. Oops, and I just realized I should probably, just to be sure, I should run frame 100 as well instead of 1. And then we should be good. All right. Yeah, everybody who's still in here, thanks for hanging out. Like I've said over and over, these are way more fun to do with somebody. And I like the questions that come up. I like people being able to kind of debate and talk about the hardware instead of just me sitting here doing them in silence and then posting it as a video. So thanks for being here. Let me know what you think and all that. But yeah, go check out the Patreon. There's not much there, but you can be a free member. And then every time I post stuff for free, you can see it. So I'll have a bunch of like Blender meta rigs that I've created for various combinations of character body types. Um, I'll probably have characters on there eventually when I've decided that they're good enough to share. I'll have benchmark scenes that are off the wall, like the diamond scene. Um, but I just kind of want to use Patreon as a good place to share files to you guys so that we don't have to deal with like the Google drives and whatever stuff like that. You can just go on there and download it and then get notices when I post things. So if you want to check it out, might be kind of cool. They've changed how it works so you don't have to be a paid member anymore to see things, which is great because that's why I didn't really use it before. Wow, look at this. So this still took a minute and 40 seconds. A minute and 40 is 60 plus 40. So it took 2 seconds off. Look at that. So the 3080 actually smashed the 3080 Ti in that case. Well, just to see, let's switch to this other one, because I know one of these is my high-end Zotac, and one of them is not. So let's just see if there is a difference between the two that's significant enough. Because that's another possibility. A good 3080 versus a average 3080 Ti will give you weird results, but also a really, really good 3080 Ti versus a normal 3080 Ti. So you just never know, you know, silicone lottery. But yeah, the um, my best 3080 Ti is the Zotac Amp Extreme Hollow, I think is what it is. And that one, in every workload I've thrown at it, it outperforms its peers by a wide margin, including mining. It did way more on that than it could in most of my cards. All right. This one definitely even looks faster. I wonder if this is the Zotac. So then the question is, which card do you use? Do you use the faster one? I think you have to, right? Yeah, a minute 5. Let's do that. Let's just do that. So a minute 5 is 65 seconds. That makes way more sense. Um, run second 3080 Ti. I have to remember that. I'll have to look at that card because um, that's almost like it's having a thermal problem. I don't. The classroom scene won't matter because they're going to be close anyway. But everything after that, yeah, we'll have to rerun them. That's pretty wild. Let's just try 3080 here then. Okay, okay. So the barbershop scene, I think we put our demons to rest on that one. This one, let's run the Zotac instead of the. I think it's a gigabyte with a smaller cooler on it. Is the GPU 0. GPU 1, which is this one, is the Zotac Amp Extreme 3080 Ti. And this is the one that overclocks 15 or 20% better than the other ones, including my EVGA, by the way. I have a for the Win 3 model, which I always thought of as the best, but I think this thing murders it. So this test won't take all that long. Now what we can do, now that we're testing different GPUs. I'm going to reopen this scene, and we're going to run the 3080 in parallel because I've shown that that doesn't cause a problem. Well, I've shown at least debatably that it doesn't cause a problem. So this now is the 3080. So if you look, just to check for bottlenecks, RAM is about a third full. CPU has, it looks like about 2 cores, maybe 1.5 running at full speed. So I don't think we have a bottleneck going on there. And then we have GPU 0 and GPU 2 are running full bore. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the Zotac. The GPU 2 3080 Ti running full speed at 63 Celsius is probably the higher end one, if I had to guess. Man, that 5800X sure does good. 4.7. I don't think my 5950X on my desktop gets to 4.7 on very many workloads anymore. Should probably recheck the thermal paste, but yeah. All right. So these will be getting done pretty soon. The 3080 Ti is nearly there. Yeah, these are fast. Remember the 1080 and the 1660 Super and the 5600 XT were in the 12, 13, 14 minute range. And this card is going to come in at just about 3 minutes. So if you want to make a practical comparison to what does render speed actually give you, this card just gave me 9 minutes basically. So this one saved me 9 minutes to do the same frame. So 3 minutes and 5 seconds was the TI. Yeah, so that's consistent. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. What am I doing? 185. And then the 3080 should get done any second. So we'll close this guy. That one's about half done. Yep, and then after this it'll be Scanlands. Yeah, Edgar, I'll definitely get all of your results typed out. And then I'll probably make a separate tab for CPU results, including rendering. But I really want to make a simulation baking tab so that I can test CPUs for that. And I'll probably just make a MantaFlow test in Blender so that everyone can do it. So it's not relying on like flip fluids. But I'll be sending that out sooner or later because that one's easier to standardize. But I think that'd be a cool one. I don't think I've ever seen anybody try to standardize baking tests. Okay, 3 minutes and 37 seconds was the 3080. So 3 is 180 plus 37 is 217. Okay, yeah, see the 3080 Ti is showing its muscle a little bit here on the longer scene, which definitely makes sense. All right, so Scanlands is all now. And of course, this one we can do the same thing, where we just open it up twice and run the GPU separate. Alrighty. I think we'll probably have to reload our render kernels just like every other time. So I'll just start some dummy ones and then we'll cancel them and restart. Oh, this one, I think this one went just fine actually. Okay, that one's the one running. And now we just need to run the 3080 on one. See how long this loads. Oh, nothing. That's it. Okay. Okay, that one's about done. So that's this guy. And this is the first 3080 Ti. Let's see how that does. Right at 1 minute and 1 second. So I want to try that again and compare the two 3080 Ti's. We'll see if that's any faster. If it is, we'll keep it. The 3080 took 55 seconds. Yeah, see? That's very, very interesting. The difference in the 3080 Ti's is enough that it either wins or loses to the 3080 in this case. Definitely need to check that GPU out, make sure it's not too hot or something. But if it's one of those gigabyte cards, I guarantee you it's dripping oil. So that was the 3080. Yeah, the better 3080 Ti was 42 minutes or 42 and a quarter seconds. So 42.3. And the 3080 was what? I think I just canceled it. Yep, I did. We'll just start the render again because it'll tell me what the last frame was. 54 and a half. 54 and a half for that guy. And that makes more sense. Yeah, so yeah, so these guys are new. Look at that though. 10 times. The 3080 Ti is 10 times faster than a 1660 Super and about the same compared to a 1080. However, a 4070 is very, very close to a 3080 Ti. So on this scene, the 3080 actually lost to the 4070. So again, 3080 is closer to 300 watt power draw. 4070 is 200. So that's the kind of difference you got to look at. But all right, 54 and a half again. So that looks good. So that's it for Scanlands. Save. We can close everything out and sign off of the render worker. Yeah, but that's it. I'm glad we added some of those. But yeah, Edgar, I'm gonna throw the rest of your data on here by the next time, so that it's all shown, and we'll start to organize the CPU information because nobody's probably going to CPU render very much if they can help it, but you can compare the processors that way, even if you don't intend on rendering with them. So I think for now, we'll probably call it quits on the rendering. So, um, whoever else is interested, I might hang out for just a few more minutes and um, maybe I'll go look at that character file I've been working on. Um, but I guess guys, get in the chat and let me know if you want to see anything else right now. The next stream like this will probably be in a few days or possibly next like Monday night. So if you got something on your mind, let me know. Um, because it'll be just a little while and I'll be out of town this weekend. So I know it won't be this weekend, but uh what else did we miss? Didn't include my Radeon 680M results. I will soon though. Don't worry, Edgar, I'll get them on there. And thank you for submitting all of that information. Um, as much hardware as I don't have anywhere near all of it. And uh, the only way I'm going to be able to provide the information I want to provide is if people pitch in. And so, thank you for doing that for me. That's a huge deal. Um, and I think we're just helping people get good info so they can make a good decision. But yeah, guys, that's it. I think for tonight for GPU stuff, for benchmarking stuff. Um, the rest of the weekdays this week, before I leave town, I'll probably be doing character stuff. Um, I threw an idea around with somebody in a comment about having the new character knocking some like Roman pillars over. So I'll be doing like fracture physics stuff and rigid bodies and particles. So that'll be fun because I haven't done a ton of it, but I think Blender 3.6 actually has some new particle simulation stuff. So I'll be learning that, hopefully doing something cool with it. But make sure my stuff is saved here. I might go pull open that file for just a second. And if anybody wants to check it out, they can. Otherwise, yeah, that's about it for computers for tonight. I think I basically have exhausted all of the untested GPUs that are in the house right now. So, um, the rest of them are out in machines, and I have to go disconnect them and stuff. But yeah, so if anyone sticks around or if they have a chat, let me know. If you want to know anything about this character, it's still just kind of work in progress. But just got it retopologized Friday night. I ended up streaming for like 6 straight hours and getting this thing done. So, um, topology wise, there's all that's left. And then I'm just going to start doing materials and stuff this week and get them ready for some animation. But yeah, let me know what else you guys want to see in the comments. Thanks for coming by. I'll just let it run here for a minute and kill it. But had a lot of fun, and I think we got some really good data tonight. I mean, we tested like five different GPUs tonight, so more productive than usual even. All right. Okay. Yeah, for anybody that is still hanging out, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bake the normal map from this higher resolution sculpt onto the newly retopologized model, and then this thing will be ready to texture and everything. So I think we can apply these modifiers here. Maybe. Strength 0. If it looks fine then. There we go. That should fix the modifier issue. Okay, now these should be in the exact same spot. And I'm going to try to remember how to bake this. Bake the high to the low. So I need to go to render settings. Bake. Okay, yeah, here we go. Texture paint. So there's our old one. We want that. Probably need a new one. Oh, I need to UV unwrap this too. That's the other problem. Let's just see what Blender does with it. It just makes it align. Smart UV project. It's not terrible, but we can do way better than that for texturing purposes. All right. Yep. Well, anyway, um, that is what the new character looks like. Got to redo his eyes. Um, basically apply the normal map to the low poly one, UV unwrap, all that stuff. But be doing materials this week, and then time to have him knock some stuff over, I think. So that's what's coming soon. If you guys want to check this out, I'll probably be posting about it soon. Otherwise, thanks for coming. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. I appreciate all of the support from you guys, and we'll be seeing you soon.